Pregnancy is the most extraordinary transformation in human biology, where bones, blood, and a brand new brain are built in darkness. From weightless kicks to the first breath, hormones, energy, and evolution weave a mystery of life. In this journey, we'll explore why pregnancy is insane, miraculous, and unlike anything else on Earth. Every human story begins in silence, in a place too small for the naked eye to see, and in conditions so delicate and improbable that the very fact you are here reading this is nothing short of astonishing. It is tempting to believe that life is ordinary, that people are born every second, and therefore it must be simple, natural, even routine. But when you look closer at the beginning of existence, when you allow yourself to drift into the invisible drama that unfolds at the cellular level, you realize that pregnancy is one of the strangest, most mind-bending processes biology has ever engineered. Each of us begins as a single microscopic cell, not a conscious one, not a self-aware spark of being, just a bundle of molecules, proteins, and genetic code bound together in a bubble of membrane. And yet from that one cell comes a complete human being with trillions of cells, each different, each knowing where it belongs, each able to cooperate with others in an orchestra that never stops playing. Think about that. You, with all your thoughts, memories, tastes, dreams, and scars, were once nothing more than a single cell, smaller than the width of a strand of hair. The improbability begins even before that cell comes into being. Fertilization itself is an event so unlikely that calling it a miracle is not just poetry, but fairly close to a scientific truth. Inside one moment of intimacy, hundreds of millions of sperm are released. They begin their marathon journey, and almost all of them are doomed to fail within minutes. The environment of the female reproductive system is hostile, acidic, and guarded like a fortress. Only a few thousand ever make it close to the egg. Out of those, only a tiny handful come within touching distance. And finally, only one will penetrate and fuse with the egg. One winner, one spark out of millions. The mathematics alone are enough to stagger the mind. For you to exist, that one sperm had to meet that one egg at that exact moment. If the meeting had been delayed by even hours, if a different sperm had fused instead, you would not be you. You might not exist at all. Pregnancy from its first breath is insane in its precision and its chances. When the sperm pierces the egg, a biochemical lightning storm erupts. Electrical changes sweep across the egg's surface in fractions of a second. Barriers rise to block any other sperm from entering. What was once two cells becomes one. The DNA of your mother and father swirl together, forming a completely new genetic combination that has never existed before in the history of the universe and will never exist again. Within that moment, the blueprint of a human is written. Whether your eyes will be brown or green, whether you will grow tall or short, whether your hair will curl or fall straight, all the genetic scaffolding is there, encoded in the spiral ladder of DNA. But the code alone is not enough. A blueprint means nothing without builders. And here is where the story turns even more incredible. That first fertilized cell, the zygote, does not simply sit there. It divides. And then it divides again. 1 becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8, and so on, doubling and doubling like the rhythm of a drumbeat. Within days, there is a ball of cells compacted together like a tiny cluster of grapes. At this stage, all the cells are still identical. They carry within them the power to become anything: a skin cell, a neuron, a muscle fiber, a bone cell. They are all possible futures. This is the most extraordinary moment of potential in the history of your life. For a brief period, you are pure possibility. But possibility is not stability. These cells must make decisions. They must start differentiating, a process in which identical cells take on specific fates. Some will go on to form the protective shell that nourishes and guards the embryo. Others will become the building blocks of the actual body. It is at this moment that a new human stops being an abstract idea and starts being a biological construction project. The cells migrate, fold, and signal to one another with invisible chemical whispers. Imagine a crowd of dancers on a dark stage, each listening to the same silent music, each moving in perfect coordination without a conductor. That is embryonic development, a choreography more precise than anything humans could design. And it all happens without conscious direction. There is no overseer, no tiny engineer inside the cell guiding it. The process emerges out of chemistry and evolution, perfected across billions of years of trial and error. The scale of improbability only increases as the embryo journeys into the uterus. After fertilization, the zygote drifts slowly down the fallopian tube, dividing as it travels. It is a perilous trip. If it implants in the wrong place, in the fallopian tube instead of the uterus, the pregnancy cannot continue. If it fails to implant at all, the embryo is lost. Many pregnancies end this way, so quietly that the person never even knows conception occurred. The survivors are the lucky ones, and luck in this case is measured by microscopic alignments of timing, chemistry, and cellular strength. By the time the embryo burrows into the lining of the uterus, it is no longer a simple cluster of cells. It is becoming something new, something parasitic and cooperative at the same time, something that will change the body that hosts it in profound ways. Consider how bizarre this is. The uterus, which has functioned for decades as part of an independent organism, suddenly transforms into a construction site for an entirely different being. Blood vessels expand, hormones surge, tissues soften. A new organ, the placenta, begins to form. An organ that exists for one pregnancy only and then disappears. There is nothing else like it in biology. Imagine your body deciding to grow a temporary heart or a temporary lung and then dismantling it after 9 months. That is the kind of feat pregnancy pulls off as though it were routine. Even at this early stage, when the embryo is barely visible to the naked eye, the foundations of a human are being laid. Cells that will one day become neurons are already clustering in primitive sheets. Cells destined to form the heart begin to twitch with electrical pulses, tiny sparks that will grow into the full rhythm of circulation. The axis of the body is defined, top and bottom, left and right, front and back. It is as if a cosmic compass has been placed inside the embryo, pointing it toward its future shape. How does a cluster of cells know how to fold into a spine? How do they know where to put the beginnings of eyes, ears, or limbs? The answers are written in chemical gradients, in genetic switches, in signals so subtle and complex that scientists are still unraveling them today. And yet, without fanfare, it works. Most of the time, it works flawlessly. From chaos comes order, and from order comes a creature that will one day walk, talk, and dream. What makes this beginning truly insane is not just the improbability of fertilization or the complexity of development, but the sheer scale of transformation. In the span of a few weeks, you go from being a single invisible cell to being an organized embryo with the beginnings of organs. You are no longer just a possibility. You are becoming a physical reality, and none of this requires your will or effort. It unfolds whether you think about it or not, whether you know about it or not, whether the parent carrying you is even aware of the pregnancy. The strangeness of this cannot be overstated. Two people meet, cells combine, and an entire human blueprint is activated automatically, guided not by thought but by the logic of biology. It is tempting to frame this process in simple, almost mechanical terms. One cell divides, then another, like copying files on a computer. But cells are not computers. They are living entities, each with thousands of moving parts, each constantly sensing, adjusting, and communicating. The probability that all of them cooperate perfectly is low, and yet they do. Not always. Missteps happen. Chromosomes fail to align, genes misfire, cells wander off course. Some of these errors lead to miscarriage. Others lead to developmental differences that shape the person's future in unique ways. Even in error, pregnancy is a demonstration of life's resilience. It is proof that biology is not rigid, but adaptable, finding ways to continue even when conditions are not perfect. As you drift into sleep with this story, consider just how unlikely your existence is. Out of billions of possible sperm, out of millions of possible eggs across decades of reproductive life, out of the countless ways fertilization could fail or implantation could falter, somehow it all worked. The DNA came together, the cells divided, the embryo implanted. And then the astonishing machinery of pregnancy took over, carrying the project forward one heartbeat, one chemical signal, one division at a time. If even one of those steps had failed, you would not be here. The fact that you are breathing and thinking and reading these words, is the conclusion of an almost impossible sequence of events. Pregnancy is not ordinary. It is not routine. It is insane, improbable, and beautiful all at once. And this is only the beginning. What starts as a single cell will go on to sculpt bones, wire brains, ignite senses, and rewrite the very body that carries it. The strangeness will only deepen as we move further, as organs are formed, as bodies shift, as two beings share the same space in ways that defy logic. But for now, remember the strangeness of your own beginning. Remember that you were once smaller than dust, invisible to the naked eye, and yet within you lay the potential for everything you are. The odds were against you, and still, here you are. That is why pregnancy is insane. Life begins with a race, but not the kind with medals, cheering crowds, or even finish lines you can see. It is the strangest and most microscopic contest on Earth, one in which billions of competitors set out and only one ever truly wins. Fertilization is often described in textbooks as the meeting of sperm and egg, a neat and tidy definition, but the reality is wild, chaotic, and almost beyond belief. To understand why pregnancy is insane, you must first imagine what happens in those opening moments of conception, when the smallest cells in the human body begin their improbable journey toward creating the largest change a body can experience. The story begins inside the testes, where sperm are manufactured in the millions every single day. These cells are tiny, stripped-down packages of DNA with little more than a whip-like tail for propulsion. Each one is fragile, short-lived, and incomplete on its own. On the other side of the equation, the egg waits. Unlike sperm, which are disposable and numerous, eggs are precious. A woman is born with all the eggs she will ever have, hundreds of thousands stored away since before birth, slowly maturing across decades. Most will never see the light of day. Each month, usually only one is released during ovulation. This is the rare jewel in the lottery of life. For a pregnancy to begin, the egg and one sperm must meet in the narrow corridor of the fallopian tube, and the odds of that encounter are far lower than most people ever imagine. When ejaculation occurs, the starting line of the race explodes open. Roughly 200 to 300 million sperm are launched into the vagina, an army of microscopic swimmers suddenly thrust into an environment that is actively hostile to their survival. The vagina is acidic, designed to keep out invaders, and most sperm die within minutes. For all their frantic motion, for all the billions released, the vast majority never even make it past the entrance gate. Within the first hour, their numbers are cut down from hundreds of millions to a few million. The attrition is merciless. Those that survive must now navigate the labyrinth of the female reproductive tract. It is not a straight highway. The cervix blocks the way, sealed with mucus that changes in consistency across the cycle. At the time of ovulation, that mucus becomes thinner, allowing sperm to wriggle through, but the passage is still narrow and selective. Only the strongest and most agile swimmers make it through. Beyond the cervix lies the uterus, a muscular chamber that can contract to help move sperm upward, but it can also act like a riptide that sweeps them off course. From there, two fallopian tubes stretch outward, and the sperm must somehow choose the correct one, the one that actually contains the egg. Choose wrong, and the race ends in futility. By this point, out of hundreds of millions, only a few thousand competitors remain. And then comes the strangest part of all. The sperm are not just racing blindly. They are responding to chemical signals released by the egg and the surrounding cells, microscopic pheromones that act like beacons in the dark. These signals draw them closer, guiding them like invisible arrows toward their target. Picture it. Thousands of tiny swimmers, each no larger than a grain of dust, detecting subtle chemical gradients and steering themselves through a maze of tissue and fluid. It is navigation on a scale so small that even scientists struggle to measure it. When they finally reach the egg, the contest becomes even more brutal. The egg is encased in protective layers, the zona pellucida and corona radiata, which must be breached before fertilization can occur. The sperm release enzymes from their acrosomes, specialized caps on their heads that act like chemical drills. Dozens, even hundreds of sperm swarm the egg at once, hammering against its defenses, but only one will succeed in penetrating. This is the climax of the race, the finish line where billions have fallen and a single champion remains. The moment one sperm breaks through, the egg undergoes a rapid transformation. Electrical charges sweep across its surface in milliseconds, sealing it against further entry. The door slams shut behind the winner. The fusion of sperm and egg is complete. Two sets of DNA, each carrying half the instructions for life, unite into a new whole. A zygote is born, and with it, the story of a new human being begins. Every detail of your body, from the curve of your nose to the color of your eyes, was set in motion during that instant. Pause here and consider the improbability. You exist because one sperm out of hundreds of millions happened to reach the egg at the exact right moment. If any other sperm had arrived first, the DNA would have combined differently, and you would be a different person or perhaps not exist at all. Conception is a lottery in the truest sense, a game of chance in which the odds are nearly impossible, and yet somehow, against all expectation, it works. Scientists sometimes refer to this process as the bottleneck of reproduction. Billions enter, one emerges. It is ruthless and extravagant, wasteful and precise. Evolution designed it this way for a reason. By forcing so many competitors to race, nature ensures that only the fittest sperm, the strongest swimmers with the best DNA packaging, reach the egg. It is quality control on a microscopic scale. And yet, even with this selection, fertilization does not always succeed. Many eggs are never fertilized at all. Even when they are, not every zygote continues to develop. The odds remain stacked against life at every step, and still, somehow, it happens millions of times every year across the world. There is also a deeper strangeness to this lottery. Sperm and egg are not equal players. The sperm provides DNA, but little else. The egg, on the other hand, contributes not only DNA, but also all the machinery necessary to begin cell division. Mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses of the cell, are inherited entirely from the mother. Every ounce of energy in your cells traces back to that one egg. Fertilization is not just a merger of equals, it is a union in which the egg provides the foundation, the tools, and the very energy to begin building a new human. And what follows is no less astonishing. Within hours of fertilization, the zygote begins to divide. One cell becoming two, two becoming four, the first steps in a cascade that will eventually produce trillions. The race is over, but the journey has only begun. The embryo is now on its way down the fallopian tube, rolling slowly toward the uterus, where it will attempt to implant and continue growing. Even now, in these earlier stages, the odds of survival remain low, but the seed has been planted. The improbable has become real. It is easy to overlook how insane this beginning is because it happens invisibly, without fanfare, without conscious awareness. People imagine pregnancy as a 9-month process, measured in trimesters, ultrasounds, and expanding bellies. But in truth, the first chapter is the wildest of all. Billions of microscopic beings set out on a race they cannot understand. They swim through hostile terrain, guided by chemical signals they cannot see, competing for a prize that only one will ever claim. And out of that chaos emerges the quiet beginning of a person. The lottery of fertilization is not neat. It is brutal, wasteful, and unbelievably complex. But it is also elegant in its outcome. From chance comes order. From billions of failures comes one success. And that success is enough to carry the entire story of life forward. Each of us is the result of odds so astronomical they defy calculation. Each of us is the improbable winner of a race we never knew we ran. That is why pregnancy is not just remarkable, it is, in every sense of the word, insane. The beginning of pregnancy is not fireworks and certainty. It is not a glowing light that suddenly announces itself. Instead, it is subtle, hidden, secretive. By the time most people realize a new life is growing inside them, the process has already been unfolding for days, even weeks. These early stages are the most mysterious of all, a delicate dance between embryo and body, a negotiation of survival, and a reprogramming of physiology so profound that the person carrying the embryo may not yet have any idea what is happening. It is a chapter that unfolds in whispers rather than shouts, but in those whispers lies some of the most astonishing biology in the human story. After fertilization, the single cell that began it all divides again and again until it becomes a compact cluster called a blastocyst. It is tiny, smaller than a pinhead, but it carries with it an impossible destiny. This blastocyst must find a home, and that home is the lining of the uterus, a tissue that changes every month in anticipation of this moment. The endometrium thickens, grows blood vessels, and prepares itself for the possibility of welcoming an embryo. Most cycles, no embryo arrives, and the lining is shed during menstruation. But when the timing aligns, the blastocyst reaches the uterus like a traveler arriving at an inn just before the doors close. Implantation begins, and with it a cascade of changes that alter everything. Implantation is not gentle. The blastocyst burrows into the uterine lining with almost invasive determination. Specialized cells called trophoblasts secrete enzymes that dissolve maternal tissue, creating space for the embryo to sink into the wall. It is an act of controlled aggression, part parasite and part guest. If the embryo cannot implant properly, the pregnancy ends silently. The person may think their period is simply a little late. But when implantation succeeds, a new organ begins to form, the placenta. This organ will sustain the pregnancy for the months to come, filtering oxygen, nutrients and waste between two bodies without ever mixing their blood directly. There is no precedent for this in ordinary human life. It is like growing an entirely new life support system from scratch, and it starts within days of conception. While this microscopic construction is underway, the person carrying the embryo often feels nothing unusual. There may be the faintest signs, a touch of fatigue, a hint of mood shift, sometimes light spotting as the embryo digs in. But more often than not, there is silence. The body keeps its secret, reshaping itself quietly, almost conspiratorially. Hormones begin to surge, but in the earliest days, they are still building to levels that can be detected. A pregnancy test taken too soon may show nothing at all, even when new life is already present. This hidden quality is part of what makes the first weeks so astonishing. A person may go about their daily life, eating, walking, sleeping, unaware that their physiology is being rewritten beneath the surface. At the center of this rewrite is the hormone HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin. Produced by the cells of the early placenta, HCG signals to the body that pregnancy has begun. Its first task is to rescue the corpus luteum, a small structure in the ovary that would normally fade after ovulation. The corpus luteum produces progesterone, a hormone essential for maintaining the uterine lining. Without progesterone, the lining would break down, menstruation would begin, and the embryo would be lost. With HCG's message, however, the corpus luteum holds on, continuing to secrete progesterone and keeping the womb a safe harbor. This chemical conversation is the embryo's first negotiation with its host, a tiny voice saying, "Keep the door open, don't sweep me away, let me stay." As progesterone rises, the body shifts into a new mode. Blood vessels in the uterus expand further. The immune system begins to adjust, walking a delicate line between defending against invaders and tolerating the embryo, which is technically foreign tissue carrying genetic material from another individual. This immune tolerance is one of the great mysteries of pregnancy. In any other situation, the immune system would attack foreign cells, but in pregnancy, the body somehow makes peace with the embryo, allowing it to grow. Scientists still debate exactly how this truce is achieved, but one theory is that trophoblast cells cloak themselves with proteins that suppress maternal immune reactions, disguising the embryo as less threatening than it really is. It is an evolutionary miracle, a détente written into biology, and it happens without conscious awareness. While these hidden negotiations play out, the embryo itself is changing with breathtaking speed. Within 2 weeks of implantation, its cells are differentiating into 3 layers, each with a future destiny. The ectoderm will give rise to skin, brain, and nerves. The mesoderm will become muscles, bones, and blood. The endoderm will form the lining of the gut, the lungs, and other internal organs. Out of what was once a simple ball of cells emerges a blueprint for the entire human body. The scale of transformation in such a short time is staggering. By the time most people miss their first period and realize something might be different, the embryo is already laying down the foundations of a spine, a nervous system, even the primitive tube that will one day beat as a heart. Yet all of this happens unseen. There is no visible belly, no kicks, no dramatic announcement. The person carrying this new life may feel tired or irritable, or nothing at all. They may have no idea that their body is already hosting a construction project unlike any other. This secrecy is both protective and risky. Protective, because the body is allowed to test the embryo in these early weeks, to see whether it is viable. Risky, because a huge percentage of pregnancies end during this stage, lost before they are ever known. Evolution seems to have designed it this way, a quiet testing ground where only the strongest embryos continue. The first secret weeks are a filter, a checkpoint that determines which beginnings become journeys. Pregnancy during these weeks is insane, not only because of the biological feats involved, but also because of the dissonance between reality and perception. A person may feel like themselves, go to work, have conversations, cook dinner, all while their hormones are shifting, their blood vessels expanding, their immune system recalibrating. 2 lives are now linked, yet only one is aware of it. This hidden duality has given rise to myths, traditions, and cultural practices across history. Many societies waited to acknowledge pregnancy until after the first trimester, aware that the earliest weeks were precarious. Others surrounded the first weeks with rituals of secrecy, as though protecting the fragile process by keeping it unspoken. From a scientific perspective, what is most astonishing is the sheer speed of development. In just 4 weeks after fertilization, the embryo grows from a cluster of cells invisible to the naked eye to a structure with the beginnings of organs. It is during this time that the neural tube closes, setting the stage for the brain and spinal cord. It is during this time that the heart begins to twitch with primitive contractions. And it is during this time that the placenta establishes itself as the lifeline of pregnancy, embedding deeper into the uterine wall, creating an exchange system that will sustain life for months. All of this is underway while the world outside carries on, unaware. Think about what this means. The person carrying this embryo may not yet know. They may have no symptoms, or only subtle ones they dismiss as stress or fatigue. They may not take a test until weeks later. And yet, in that gap of unawareness, the most critical events of pregnancy are already unfolding. The embryo is not waiting for acknowledgement. It is building, differentiating, and claiming its place. In a sense, these first secret weeks are a reminder that life does not begin with fanfare, but with persistence, with invisible determination, with the quiet rewriting of a body that has not yet caught up to the reality of what it holds. The insanity of pregnancy is written in these contradictions. It is both fragile and resilient. Fragile, because so many embryos do not make it through this stage. Resilient, because when it does succeed, it builds the foundation for an entire human being in the blink of an evolutionary eye. The person carrying the embryo may still be walking around thinking they are simply late, or that their mood is off, or that they need more sleep. Meanwhile, their uterus is transforming, their hormones are surging, their immune system is bending, and a new body is taking shape inside them. It is the greatest secret biology ever keeps, and it is happening every day, quietly, invisibly, all around us. When you look back at your own beginning, you will realize that you too were once part of this silent miracle. For weeks, your existence was a secret, even to the body that carried you. You were a ball of cells carving into the uterine wall, a set of chemical signals persuading the body not to let you go, a blueprint unfolding in darkness. No one celebrated you yet. No one even knew you were there, and still you grew. Pregnancy is insane because it hides its most dramatic feats in plain sight, because it turns ordinary weeks into extraordinary ones, and because it reminds us that life is built not in moments of glory, but in quiet, secret transformations that defy imagination. Among the strangest facts about pregnancy is that the body grows a brand new organ from scratch, one that exists only for a few months, performs miracles daily, and then vanishes. This organ is the placenta, the bridge between two bodies, the lifeline between parent and child, a temporary invention of biology so astonishing that scientists still marvel at how it works. No other time in human life does an organ appear fully formed and then dissolve once its task is complete. It is a biological engineering project that begins in secret, evolves with breathtaking speed, and takes over control of the pregnancy in ways that are as eerie as they are miraculous. The placenta is the reason pregnancy is possible at all, and the story of how it develops is one of the most remarkable in science. The placenta begins at implantation, when the embryo burrows into the uterine lining. Specialized cells at the surface of the embryo, called trophoblasts, invade maternal tissue, almost like roots pushing into soil. It is an aggressive process, one that looks more like an infection under a microscope than the beginning of a symbiotic relationship. These trophoblasts digest their way into blood vessels, opening them up so that maternal blood pools around the embryo. At first, this exchange is primitive, almost crude, but within weeks, the placenta begins to organize itself into something astonishingly complex. Finger-like projections called villi extend into the maternal blood supply, massively increasing the surface area for exchange. Each villus is lined with membranes thin enough to allow gases, nutrients, and waste to pass through, but thick enough to keep the two bloodstreams separate. This separation is critical. If maternal and fetal blood mixed freely, immune reactions could destroy the pregnancy. Instead, The placenta engineers a system of parallel circulation, two rivers flowing side by side, exchanging cargo but never merging. This feat alone would make the placenta impressive, but it is only the beginning. The placenta is not a passive filter. It is an active, dynamic organ producing hormones that control nearly every aspect of pregnancy. Human chorionic gonadotropin, the hormone detected by pregnancy tests, is produced by the placenta and signals the body to maintain the uterine lining. Progesterone and estrogen, both critical for sustaining pregnancy, are also generated by placental tissue as it matures. These hormones reshape physiology, relaxing ligaments, expanding blood vessels, stimulating breast tissue, and recalibrating metabolism. The placenta effectively hijacks the parent's endocrine system, rewriting it to suit the needs of the growing fetus. In this sense, it is not just a bridge but a conductor, orchestrating the symphony of hormones that makes pregnancy possible. At its peak, the placenta is a powerhouse of exchange. Oxygen from the mother's lungs diffuses across placental membranes into fetal blood, while carbon dioxide flows the other way to be exhaled. Nutrients from food, glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, minerals, are transported with exquisite precision, ensuring that the fetus receives exactly what it needs. Waste products like urea are shuttled out into maternal blood for disposal by the kidneys. The efficiency of this system is extraordinary. The fetus, floating in amniotic fluid, does not need to breathe, eat, or eliminate waste on its own. The placenta does all of these jobs on its behalf, a perfect outsourced life support system. But the placenta is more than plumbing. It is also a gatekeeper. Harmful substances, such as many bacteria and large molecules, are blocked from crossing. Yet it is not an impenetrable wall. Alcohol, nicotine, many drugs and some viruses can slip through, which is why prenatal exposures can have such profound effects. Even with its filters, the placenta's engineering is a balance between permeability and protection, openness and defense. It must allow enough exchange to sustain life, but maintain enough boundaries to prevent harm. The fact that this balance is struck so effectively in most pregnancies is one of the quiet wonders of biology. The placenta is also a master manipulator. Far from being a passive servant, it actively shapes the parent's body to meet the fetus's needs. One way it does this is by producing hormones that affect insulin resistance. As pregnancy progresses, the placenta increases resistance to insulin in the parent's tissues, ensuring that more glucose remains in the bloodstream to be delivered to the fetus. This adaptation can sometimes go too far, resulting in gestational diabetes, but under normal conditions, it is a precise adjustment. The placenta is, in effect, altering the chemistry of the parent's body for the sake of the fetus's growth. It is as if one organism has hacked into another's metabolism and reprogrammed it. From one perspective, this looks parasitic. From another, it is the most profound cooperation imaginable. There are even deeper mysteries. Research has shown that fetal cells can cross the placental barrier and take up residence in the parent's body, sometimes for decades. This phenomenon, called microchimerism, means that long after a pregnancy ends, cells of the child can remain in the parent's organs, mingling with their tissues, even participating in repair. Some studies suggest these cells may influence immune function or healing. Others raise questions about whether they could contribute to autoimmune diseases. Whatever the long-term effects, the fact remains: the placenta allows not just molecules, but actual living cells to move between bodies, blurring the boundaries of individuality. Two lives become entangled at the cellular level, leaving traces that last a lifetime. The placenta's engineering also explains why pregnancy is both fragile and resilient. If implantation is shallow, the placenta may not establish enough blood supply, leading to miscarriage or complications like preeclampsia. If villi penetrate too deeply, the placenta may embed abnormally, creating dangerous conditions at birth. Its construction requires perfect balance. Too much or too little invasion can tip the scales toward disaster. And yet when it succeeds, it is astonishingly robust. The placenta adapts to high altitudes by increasing surface area to capture more oxygen. It adjusts in cases of maternal malnutrition, prioritizing certain nutrients for the fetus. It is a problem solver, improvising under conditions that would overwhelm any man-made system. Culturally, the placenta has fascinated humans for millennia. In some traditions, it is buried with ceremony, a symbol of the link between child and earth. In others, it is considered sacred, a guardian organ that must be honored. Modern medicine often discards it as biological waste, but even here, scientists are beginning to explore its potential. Stem cells harvested from the placenta show promise in regenerative therapies. Its unique proteins may hold clues to preventing transplant rejection or understanding cancer, since trophoblast cells share eerie similarities with invasive tumors. Once thought of as a temporary afterthought, the placenta is increasingly recognized as one of the most remarkable organs biology has ever invented. What makes it even stranger is its impermanence. The placenta appears during pregnancy, performs functions no other organ can, and then is expelled after birth. It is an organ with an expiration date, engineered for a single purpose and then discarded. Imagine if your body grew a new kidney every few years, used it briefly, and then shed it. The placenta's temporary nature is part of what makes it so surreal. It is both essential and disposable, miraculous and transient. Its disappearance at birth marks the end of one phase of life and the beginning of another. When you consider the hidden engineering of the placenta, you begin to understand why pregnancy is so difficult to compare to any other biological process. It is not simply one body growing another. It is two bodies constructing a bridge between them, a bridge that regulates, manipulates, protects, and transforms. It is an organ born of cooperation and conflict, a structure that embodies both parasitism and partnership. It is evidence that evolution is capable of solving problems in ways humans could never design, creating a temporary machine more advanced than anything we could build in a laboratory. The next time you hear someone mention the word placenta casually, remember what it represents. A new organ grown from scratch, a filter, a gatekeeper, a hormone factory, a manipulator of metabolism, a transporter of oxygen and nutrients, a defender against invaders, a negotiator of immune tolerance, a bridge that keeps two bloodstreams close but separate. It is the ultimate reminder that pregnancy is insane. No other time in life does biology conjure up such a complex and fleeting masterpiece, one that vanishes as quietly as it arrived. And so the placenta, hidden in the womb, goes about its work unseen, engineering the survival of the next generation, writing its signature into two bodies, and then departing. It is at once ordinary, happening in every pregnancy, and extraordinary, unlike anything else in biology. To understand it is to glimpse the strangeness of life itself, fragile, temporary, miraculous, and astonishingly well-designed. Pregnancy has often been wrapped in language of miracle and wonder, and rightly so, but if you strip away the poetry and look at it from a cold biological perspective, the relationship between fetus and parent begins to look eerily like something out of a survival thriller. Deep in the womb, one organism is embedded inside another, drawing blood, hijacking nutrients, and even manipulating hormones to suit its needs. To a biologist studying the process under a microscope, this arrangement carries many of the hallmarks of parasitism. And yet, this is no hostile invader. The fetus is a genetic descendant of the host, a future human being who, once born, will no longer live inside the body it currently depends upon. It is parasitic in strategy, but familial in purpose, a strange in-between category that blurs the boundaries between symbiosis and exploitation. When the embryo implants and the placenta begins its work, the fetus takes hold of the maternal bloodstream in a way that would be considered alarming if it were any other organism. The placenta carves open maternal arteries, redirecting the flow of blood so that oxygen and nutrients pool around the villi that feed the developing baby. In most circumstances, if a foreign body invaded the bloodstream and tapped directly into its resources, the immune system would unleash an attack. White blood cells would swarm, inflammation would rise, the invader would be destroyed. But in pregnancy, the fetus slips past these defenses. Through a cocktail of chemical signals, the placenta quiets immune responses, convincing the body not to recognize the growing child as foreign, even though half of its DNA comes from another person. It is as if the fetus has hacked into the body's security system, rewriting the code so that alarms do not sound. This biological takeover extends far beyond the immune system. Hormones, the chemical messengers that regulate everything from appetite to mood, are reprogrammed by the presence of the fetus. Human chorionic gonadotropin, progesterone, estrogen and placental lactogen flow in levels higher than at any other time in life. These hormones loosen ligaments, increase fat storage, stimulate breast development, and alter sleep cycles. They can create food aversions, trigger cravings, or reshape metabolism entirely. The person carrying the pregnancy may feel as if their own body has turned against them, no longer operating under the same familiar rhythms. From an evolutionary standpoint, this makes perfect sense. The fetus does not care about the parent's comfort. It cares about maximizing its survival. By pushing the host body to store more energy, crave calorie-dense foods, or slow digestion to extract every bit of nutrient, the fetus ensures its own growth. It is a strategy honed by millions of years of evolution, and it works with ruthless efficiency. The hunger of the fetus is insatiable. Calcium is pulled from bones to form a skeleton. Iron is drawn from blood to build a circulatory system. Protein, fat, and glucose are diverted from the parent's tissues toward the growing body inside. Sometimes this resource drain becomes visible. Teeth may weaken, hair may thin, fatigue may overwhelm, all signs that the fetus is demanding more than the parent's body can comfortably spare. In extreme cases, conditions like anemia or gestational diabetes appear, not because the parent has failed in any way, but because the fetus has tilted the balance so far in its favor. Scientists have noted that pregnancy is one of the most energetically expensive states in human biology, rivaling even the metabolism of endurance athletes. It is as though one body is running a marathon, while another body rides inside, consuming fuel at every mile marker. Even the cardiovascular system is commandeered. Blood volume expands by as much as 50% during pregnancy, the heart pumps harder, blood vessels dilate, all to ensure that the placenta receives a constant, rich supply. This massive adjustment taxes the parent's body but favors the fetus. Blood pressure may fluctuate, swelling may appear, the heart itself may enlarge slightly under the load. These are not malfunctions. They are consequences of sharing resources with a passenger who has no intention of going hungry. From a cold lens, it is hard not to see the fetus as a kind of friendly parasite, a dependent that bends the host's body into an entirely new form to ensure its own survival. The manipulation extends to behavior as well. Research has shown that pregnancy hormones influence the brain, enhancing sensitivity to smell and taste, sometimes provoking nausea at the scent of foods that could be harmful. This protective mechanism can look like suffering, morning sickness, food aversions, strange cravings, but underneath is a logic that shields the fetus. Bitter flavors, often associated with toxins in the natural world, become intolerable. The smell of spoiled food is detected more keenly. Meanwhile, cravings for salty or calorie-dense foods ensure that sodium balance and energy reserves remain high. Once again, the fetus is shaping the environment indirectly, nudging the parent to make choices that improve the odds of survival. This parasitic yet friendly relationship is not without conflict. Evolutionary biologists describe pregnancy as a kind of tug-of-war. The fetus, carrying half of its genes from the father, pushes for maximum resources to grow larger and stronger. The parent, carrying the risk of birth and the need to preserve their own health for future reproduction, pushes for balance. The result is a compromise, but not always a peaceful one. Conditions like preeclampsia, where blood pressure spikes, and organ strain may be the result of this evolutionary battle playing out in real time. The fetus demands more blood flow, the parent's body resists, and the system tips into crisis. To frame this in terms of parasitism is not to strip away the wonder of pregnancy, but to acknowledge the raw biological forces at play, forces that care little for comfort and everything for survival. Yet, what makes pregnancy uniquely human is that this parasitic strategy has been softened by cooperation. Unlike true parasites, which harm their hosts without care, the fetus is genetically invested in the parent's survival. If the parent dies, the fetus dies as well. This shared fate creates a delicate balance, a dance of give and take. The fetus pushes hard for resources, but not so hard as to destroy the host, while the parent's body adapts in extraordinary ways to sustain both. The result is not exploitation in the usual sense, but an uneasy alliance, one that turns parasitism into something more complex. It is symbiosis with a selfish edge, a partnership born of evolutionary necessity. Consider also how temporary this arrangement is. Parasites often linger indefinitely, draining their hosts until removed or destroyed. The fetus, however, is designed to leave. After 9 months of commandeering blood and nutrients, of bending metabolism and hormones, the child exits, and the parent's body begins to restore itself. Bones remineralize, blood volume decreases, hormone levels reset. The parasite is no longer inside. It has transformed into a newborn, a separate organism who now relies on breast milk or formula instead of a placenta, who now cries for attention rather than manipulating hormones invisibly. The parasitism ends, replaced by caregiving. This transience is what makes the fetus unique among biological interlopers. It is both dependent and destined for independence, both demanding and destined to leave. From a cultural perspective, describing the fetus as parasitic can sound harsh, even offensive, but the comparison is scientifically apt. It reminds us that pregnancy is not a gentle story of harmony, but a raw biological process where survival strategies collide. At the same time, calling it friendly acknowledges the uniqueness of the relationship. Unlike parasites, fetuses are welcomed, cherished, and loved. They drain resources, but repay them with continuity of life, with the extension of family, with the passing of genes into the future. They are parasites that parents willingly endure, sometimes even celebrate, because the outcome is so deeply meaningful. This duality is why pregnancy feels so insane. One body is taken over by another, systems are rewritten, energy is diverted, and yet the result is not destruction, but creation. The fetus hijacks blood supply, hormones, and nutrients, but in doing so, it builds the foundation of a new human being. It is at once selfish and miraculous, exploitative and cooperative, a paradox wrapped in biology. To lie down at night and realize that your very bones, blood, and thoughts are being reshaped by another life is to glimpse the strangeness of our species. No machine could replicate this, no invention could match the elegance and danger of this arrangement. It is a reminder that evolution does not design for comfort or beauty, but for survival, and survival often looks like parasitism in disguise. When you trace your own history back to the womb, you too were once that parasite, living off the blood and energy of another body, manipulating hormones to your benefit, rewriting biology to keep yourself alive. You were demanding, insistent, unrelenting, and yet you were not rejected. You were carried, sustained, allowed to grow, and when the time came, you left, no longer hidden inside but held in arms, no longer a parasite but a child. To understand this is to understand why pregnancy is both terrifying and awe-inspiring. It is a friendly invasion, a survival story written in blood and hormones, a parasitism that gives birth to love. Pregnancy is not just about carrying new life inside the body. It is about the entire body transforming into something it has never been before. If you look closely, you realize that pregnancy is the most extreme architectural renovation a human body can undergo. Every system is affected. Organs shift, bones loosen, rib cages widen, skin stretches, and blood vessels expand. It is as if biology has decided that the existing floor plan is inadequate and sets about redesigning the architecture from the inside out. What makes this remodeling so astonishing is that it happens automatically, without conscious effort, and often without the person carrying the pregnancy realizing how dramatic the changes truly are. The most visible transformation is the growing belly, but beneath that curve lies an intricate rearrangement of internal organs. As the uterus expands to accommodate the growing fetus, it pushes against everything around it. The stomach, intestines, bladder, liver, and lungs are all forced to migrate upward, sideways, or downward to make room. The intestines are compressed and shifted upward into the abdominal cavity, their coils squeezed into spaces they were never meant to occupy. The stomach is pressed, which explains why heartburn and indigestion become familiar companions during pregnancy. The bladder is pushed downward and forward, reducing its capacity and creating the frequent urge to urinate. Even the lungs are not spared. The diaphragm is pressed upward, reducing the space available for deep breaths. A person may feel short of breath after climbing stairs, not because their lungs are weaker, but because their lungs have been displaced by a growing womb. Every breath is a negotiation between the needs of the parent and the demands of the child. The rib cage itself does not simply accept this compression passively. It adapts. Hormones loosen the cartilage that connects ribs to the sternum, allowing the chest cavity to expand outward. This expansion increases lung capacity just enough to compensate for the pressure from below. It is not perfect, but it is a reminder of how resourceful the body becomes. The rib cage literally widens to make space, a permanent change in some cases, as bones do not always return fully to their original positions after pregnancy. The architecture of the torso is remodeled in a way that can leave subtle traces for life. Bones themselves soften under the influence of hormones like relaxin. This hormone loosens ligaments and joints, particularly in the pelvis, preparing the body for childbirth. The pelvic bones must become more flexible to allow a baby's head to pass through. This loosening is not limited to the pelvis, it affects joints throughout the body. Ankles may feel unstable, knees may ache, the body may feel more flexible or less coordinated. The skeleton is no longer a rigid framework, but a dynamic structure temporarily reconfigured for reproduction. From a mechanical perspective, this is extraordinary. Humans have evolved to walk upright, a balancing act that depends on stable joints. Pregnancy undermines that stability in the service of creating new life. It is a design compromise that speaks to the tension between bipedalism and childbirth, one that evolution has never fully resolved. The spine also adapts. As the belly grows, the center of gravity shifts forward. To counterbalance, the lower back curves more deeply, a condition called lordosis. Muscles in the lower back, hips and legs adjust to support the extra weight. This curvature helps prevent the pregnant body from toppling forward, but it also strains muscles and ligaments. Back pain becomes a common complaint, not because the body is failing, but because it is engaged in the monumental task of supporting a load it was not originally designed to carry. The remodeling of posture is as much a part of pregnancy as the swelling of the abdomen. Even skin participates in this renovation. As the belly expands, the skin stretches to its limits, often leaving behind stretch marks, fine lines that mark where collagen fibers have torn under tension. The skin darkens in certain places, a phenomenon called hyperpigmentation. The linea nigra, a dark vertical line down the abdomen, appears in many pregnancies, evidence of hormonal influence on melanocytes. These changes are not cosmetic quirks. They are signals that the body is adjusting at the cellular level. Skin is the largest organ, and it remodels itself alongside everything else, stretching, darkening, and adapting to a new reality. The circulatory system undergoes one of the most dramatic remodels of all. Blood volume increases by nearly 50%, an enormous expansion that provides enough oxygen and nutrients for both parent and child. To handle this surge, the heart enlarges slightly, its output increasing by as much as 30 to 50%. Blood vessels dilate, lowering resistance to keep blood pressure in check, though sometimes the system falters, resulting in conditions like hypertension or preeclampsia. Veins, under the pressure of increased volume, may bulge, creating varicose veins in the legs. Capillaries expand, producing the flushed glow often called the pregnancy glow. What looks like a cosmetic effect is actually evidence of the circulatory system straining and thriving at once. The digestive system is remodeled in subtler ways. Hormones slow the movement of food through the intestines, ensuring that more nutrients are extracted. This slowdown, while beneficial for nutrient absorption, often results in constipation, bloating, or nausea. The stomach valve that normally prevents acid reflux relaxes, leading to heartburn. These are not malfunctions, but adaptive shifts, evidence of a system reorganizing itself to prioritize the fetus's access to resources. Even discomfort is part of the remodeling, a sign that the body has new priorities. Breasts transform into factories during this time. Under the influence of estrogen, progesterone, and prolactin, milk ducts enlarge and mammary glands prepare for lactation. The breasts often grow in size, becoming heavier and sometimes tender. Veins may become more visible as blood flow increases. The areolas darken, possibly as a visual cue for the newborn after birth. This is not merely preparation, but a structural change in tissue, one that often lingers long after pregnancy ends. The remodeling of breasts is one of the most visible signals that the body is shifting from one phase of life to another. Even the brain is remodeled. Neuroimaging studies have shown that pregnancy alters grey matter volume in certain regions, particularly those linked to empathy and caregiving. These changes may persist for years, suggesting that pregnancy rewires the brain to support parenting behaviors. It is as though biology prepares not just the body, but the mind for the arrival of a child. Emotional sensitivity, heightened awareness of threat, and increased responsiveness to infant cues are not abstract psychological shifts, but rooted in measurable changes to neural architecture. Pregnancy, therefore, is not just physical remodeling, but cognitive as well, an all-encompassing renovation of self. The kidneys and liver also join this transformation. Kidneys enlarge slightly to filter the increased blood volume, working overtime to clear waste from two bodies instead of one. This heightened activity explains the frequent need to urinate. The liver adjusts its metabolism, processing new levels of hormones and altering glucose regulation. These changes, invisible to the naked eye, are fundamental to sustaining pregnancy. The entire excretory system is rewired for efficiency, accommodating demands it was never designed to handle continuously. The immune system undergoes remodeling that is perhaps the most paradoxical of all. It must suppress certain responses to tolerate the fetus, which is genetically distinct, while still defending against infection. This balancing act is one of the reasons pregnant people may be more susceptible to certain illnesses while resistant to others. The immune system reshapes itself into a new configuration, tolerating one foreign presence while guarding against everything else. This reprogramming is as much architectural as any change in bone or organ. It is the unseen scaffolding that allows pregnancy to continue. All of these changes, from shifting intestines to loosening ligaments, from increased blood volume to rewired brains, occur without conscious control. The person carrying the pregnancy cannot choose to move their stomach upward or widen their rib cage. These remodelings happen because hormones dictate them, because evolution has programmed the body to adapt, because survival of the next generation depends upon it. From the outside, pregnancy may look like a growing belly and little more. From the inside, it is a total reconfiguration of the body's design. The remodeling is temporary, but not always reversible. Many bodies return to something close to their pre-pregnancy state, but some changes linger. Rib cages may remain wider, feet may stay larger due to loosened ligaments, skin may carry stretch marks, and the brain may retain its new patterns. The body does not simply snap back to its old blueprint, it has been altered by the experience. This permanence is part of what makes pregnancy profound. It leaves traces not just in the form of a child, but in the body itself, echoes of the months spent remodeling architecture from within. If you step back and look at this process from a distance, the insanity of pregnancy becomes clear. No building could withstand the kind of renovations the pregnant body undergoes. Imagine shifting walls, moving plumbing, expanding ceilings, rerouting electrical systems, all while the building remains occupied and functional. That is pregnancy. The body continues to eat, walk, sleep, and think while its architecture is rearranged at every level. It is a feat of engineering so advanced that no human designer could replicate it. To walk through the world while your organs shift, your bones loosen, your rib cage expands, your blood volume doubles, and your brain rewires is to embody the strangeness of life itself. It is not gentle, it is not always comfortable, but it is miraculous in its effectiveness. Pregnancy is insane because it remodels the body into something new, a structure built not for permanence, but for the passage of another life into the world. Pregnancy is often spoken about as if it is a journey, as if one body is simply carrying another gently along. But this picture leaves out the sheer architectural drama unfolding beneath the skin. The pregnant body is not a still container. It is a building under constant renovation, a living structure that must expand, loosen, bend, and rewire itself in order to accommodate the growth of another life. To call this remodeling extraordinary is an understatement. Imagine waking up one morning to find that your entire house had decided, without your permission, to knock down walls, move plumbing, expand hallways, and strengthen its foundation while you were still living in it. That is pregnancy. Organs are pushed and compressed, rib cages widen, bones soften, ligaments stretch, blood vessels multiply, skin stretches to its limits, and even the brain rewrites its wiring. Every corner of the body is altered by the demand to nurture new life. The first and most obvious change is the expansion of the uterus. Normally about the size of a fist, it stretches to become large enough to house a growing fetus, placenta, and amniotic sac. This expansion does not happen in isolation. Everything around it must shift. The intestines, once comfortably coiled in the abdominal cavity, are forced upward and sideways, compressed into strange positions. The stomach is squashed, contributing to heartburn and indigestion. The bladder is pressed downward, reducing its capacity and creating the constant urge to urinate. The lungs, too, are crowded, squeezed by the rising diaphragm, which is pushed several inches higher than usual. Breathing becomes shallower, and even simple exertion can leave a person winded, not because the lungs are weak, but because they have been relocated. These movements are not gentle nudges. They are profound relocations of organs that normally stay in their designated spaces. Pregnancy turns the abdomen into a crowded neighborhood, each organ shoved into an unfamiliar apartment. The rib cage responds to this pressure by literally changing shape. Under the influence of hormones, especially relaxin, the cartilage connecting the ribs to the sternum softens. This flexibility allows the rib cage to flare outward, creating more room for the lungs and heart. In some cases, the rib cage remains permanently wider after pregnancy, a subtle architectural mark left behind by the months of expansion. The sternum can shift forward, the chest circumference increases, and the body adapts to make sure oxygen exchange can keep pace with the needs of two lives. When historians speak of armor being reshaped to fit the human chest, they marvel at metalwork. Yet the body does this with living bone and cartilage, sculpting itself into a new shape, as if it were clay. Bones throughout the body soften and loosen thanks to relaxin. The pelvis in particular becomes more flexible. Ligaments stretch, joints loosen, and the entire pelvic girdle prepares for the extraordinary physics of childbirth. This loosening can sometimes make walking feel unstable or create pain in the hips and lower back. Ankles and knees may feel less steady, as though the very scaffolding of the skeleton is more fluid than before. From an evolutionary perspective, this flexibility is both essential and dangerous. Humans walk upright, a delicate balancing act that requires stable hips and knees. Pregnancy undermines that stability for the sake of widening the birth canal, a compromise written into our species by evolution. No engineer would design such a precarious system, yet biology makes it work. The pelvis remodels itself to become a gateway, trading structural stability for the possibility of new life. The spine curves more deeply as the center of gravity shifts forward. To balance the weight of a growing belly, the lower back arches in a condition called lordosis. Muscles along the spine, hips and legs strain to compensate, often resulting in back pain. But this adjustment is not a flaw, it is an adaptation. Without this remodeling of posture, the pregnant body would be pulled forward, making walking nearly impossible. Instead, the spine bends, the muscles tighten, and the architecture of balance is recalibrated. It is as if the body is redesigning its load-bearing beams in real time. Circulation undergoes one of the most dramatic remodelings. Blood volume increases by nearly 50%, creating a surge of fluid that must be pumped, distributed, and filtered. The heart enlarges slightly, cardiac output rises, and blood vessels dilate to accommodate the flood. Veins swell, sometimes bulging into varicose veins as pressure mounts. Capillaries expand, giving the skin a flushed glow often described as the pregnancy glow. This glow is not cosmetic magic. It is the visible evidence of a cardiovascular system running at maximum capacity. The kidneys take on the burden of filtering the increased blood flow, which explains why urination becomes frequent and persistent. Even the liver adjusts, shifting its metabolism to process higher levels of hormones. The circulatory system is not simply working harder, it is restructured into something new, a system capable of sustaining two lives instead of one. The digestive system adapts in subtler ways. Hormones slow peristalsis, the muscular contractions that push food through the intestines. This slowdown allows more time for nutrients to be absorbed, ensuring the fetus has access to every possible calorie, vitamin, and mineral. The trade-off is constipation, bloating, and nausea. The valve between the esophagus and stomach relaxes, leading to acid reflux and heartburn. These symptoms are not accidents. They are signs that digestion has been remodeled to prioritize nutrient extraction over comfort. The body is choosing efficiency over ease, redesigning its internal schedule to funnel resources toward growth. Breasts remodel themselves into factories, glands swell, ducts multiply, and tissue becomes engorged in preparation for lactation. Estrogen, progesterone, and prolactin orchestrate this transformation, increasing blood flow, enlarging tissue, and darkening areolas. Veins may stand out more visibly under the skin, a network of supply lines feeding the new machinery. The breasts, once primarily cosmetic in their social role, become functional, industrial, essential. They are transformed into tools for survival, capable of producing the perfect food for a newborn. The remodeling of breast tissue is one of the clearest signals that pregnancy is not confined to the abdomen, but is a whole-body transformation. Skin also changes. As the belly expands, collagen fibers stretch, sometimes tearing to create stretch marks. Pigmentation increases in certain areas, producing the linea nigra, a dark vertical line down the abdomen, or melasma, patches of darker skin on the face. These changes are driven by hormones, but manifest physically, leaving visible reminders of pregnancy. Skin is the largest organ, and it remodels alongside bones, muscles, and blood vessels. It is both barrier and canvas, recording the story of pregnancy in subtle lines and shades. Even the brain is not spared. Neuroimaging has revealed that pregnancy alters grey matter in regions linked to empathy, social cognition, and caregiving. These changes are long-lasting, persisting for years after birth. The brain is remodeling itself into a state better prepared for parenting, enhancing sensitivity to infant cues and emotional connection. This is not metaphorical, but measurable. Neurons reorganize, synapses are pruned, and brain volume shifts in ways that reflect a new priority: the survival and care of the child. The remodeling of the mind is as profound as the remodeling of the body, and it shows that pregnancy is not only about physical architecture, but also about psychological readiness. The immune system undergoes a delicate reconstruction. Normally it would reject anything foreign, but during pregnancy it must tolerate the fetus, which carries half its DNA from another source. Immune cells recalibrate, suppressing some responses while enhancing others. This balance is precarious, leaving the pregnant body more vulnerable to certain infections, but also uniquely protected against others. The immune system becomes a remodeled gatekeeper, opening the door to one foreign presence while holding it shut against everything else. These renovations do not end neatly with birth. Many persist. Rib cages may remain slightly wider. Feet may stay larger due to the loosening of ligaments. Skin may carry permanent stretch marks. The brain may remain wired differently, more attuned to caregiving. The remodeling of pregnancy is not entirely reversible. It leaves behind echoes, structural and emotional, that become part of the person's lifelong architecture. To call this process insane is not exaggeration. The human body is essentially dismantled and rebuilt over the course of 9 months, all while continuing daily life. The pregnant person goes to work, eats meals, laughs with friends, sleeps and wakes, all while their organs migrate, their bones soften, their rib cage expands, their blood volume surges, their skin stretches, and their brain rewires. It is a renovation project carried out in silence, without blueprints, overseen only by the automatic wisdom of hormones and evolution. Imagine living in a building where the walls moved overnight, the hallways expanded, the windows stretched, and the roof lifted, all while you sat quietly at the kitchen table. That is pregnancy. It is the hidden remodeling of the mother's body, the most extreme redesign biology can attempt. It is a reminder that our bodies are not static machines, but living, adaptable structures, capable of feats that defy imagination. Pregnancy is not just carrying a child. It is reinventing the architecture of the human body, rewriting its design so that life can continue. Pregnancy is not only about expanding bellies and shifting bones, it is also about an invisible flood of chemicals that rewires the body and the mind. Hormones, those tiny molecular messengers that drift through the bloodstream, become the real architects of pregnancy. They whisper instructions to organs, recalibrate the brain, influence appetite, alter sleep, and shape emotions in ways that can feel both bewildering and profound. To call it a hormonal roller coaster barely captures the reality. It is more like a full symphony, with dozens of instruments playing at once, sometimes in harmony, sometimes in chaos, producing the soundtrack of pregnancy. From the very first days after conception, hormone levels begin to climb. One of the earliest is human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG, produced by the developing placenta. It is the hormone detected by pregnancy tests, the first chemical announcement that a new life is underway. HCG's role is to rescue the corpus luteum in the ovary, the small gland that produces progesterone. Without this rescue mission, progesterone would fall, the uterine lining would shed, and the embryo would be lost. With HCG rising rapidly, doubling every few days in the early weeks, the pregnancy stabilizes. For many, HCG is also the culprit behind morning sickness, the queasiness and vomiting that appear in the first trimester. It is as though the hormone is not only securing the pregnancy, but also reshaping appetite, turning the body away from foods that could be harmful and pushing it towards safety. Progesterone is another major player in this hormonal flood. It relaxes smooth muscle throughout the body, keeping the uterine walls calm so contractions do not expel the embryo too soon. But progesterone's calming effect is not selective. It relaxes the muscles of the digestive tract, slowing food movement and causing bloating, constipation, and heartburn. It relaxes blood vessels, lowering resistance, and sometimes leading to dizziness or swelling. It even influences the brain, contributing to fatigue and mood shifts. Progesterone is a hormone of protection, building a stable environment, but its side effects ripple outward into daily life. Estrogen surges alongside progesterone, rising to levels far higher than outside of pregnancy. Estrogen stimulates the growth of the uterus, enhances blood flow, and promotes the development of breast tissue in preparation for lactation. It sharpens the sense of smell and taste, an adaptation that may help detect spoiled food or toxins. It influences mood as well, sometimes creating surges of energy and at other times fueling irritability. Estrogen is a hormone of growth and amplification, intensifying the body's systems to meet the demands of pregnancy. The skin, hair, and even the vascular system respond to its signals. Increased circulation under estrogen's influence produces the so-called pregnancy glow, a flush of color and radiance caused not by magic, but by capillaries working overtime. Another key hormone is human placental lactogen, or HPL, produced by the placenta. HPL modifies the parent's metabolism, increasing insulin resistance so that more glucose remains in the bloodstream, ready to be shuttled to the fetus. This adjustment ensures that the developing baby has a steady supply of energy, but it also means the pregnant body must work harder to regulate blood sugar. In some cases, this leads to gestational diabetes, a condition that disappears after birth but reveals how powerful HPL can be. It is a hormone that prioritizes the fetus above all else, rewriting the rules of metabolism to keep resources flowing in one direction. Relaxin, true to its name, loosens the ligaments and joints. It softens the pelvis, preparing for childbirth, and contributes to the expansion of the rib cage. But relaxin's influence extends beyond the hips. Ankles, knees, and other joints also feel its effects, sometimes producing a sense of instability. While relaxin is essential for making birth possible, it also demonstrates how hormones can alter the mechanics of everyday life, changing the way a person walks, bends, or carries weight. Oxytocin, though more famous for its role in labor, is present throughout pregnancy. Often called the love hormone, it strengthens emotional bonding and reduces stress. Its levels rise in anticipation of childbirth, preparing the uterus for contractions and priming the brain for connection with the newborn. Oxytocin works hand in hand with endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, setting the stage for both the ordeal and the reward of birth. Long before the first contraction, oxytocin is quietly shaping mood and behavior, encouraging feelings of closeness and nurturing. Prolactin, the hormone responsible for milk production, increases during pregnancy as well. It reshapes breast tissue, enlarges milk ducts, and prepares the body for feeding. But prolactin also affects the brain. It contributes to emotional sensitivity, reinforcing the bond between parent and child. In many ways, prolactin is the hormone that looks beyond pregnancy to what comes after, building the scaffolding for caregiving and nourishment. Taken together, these hormones form a chemical flood that alters nearly every aspect of life. Appetite changes dramatically. Foods once craved may suddenly taste repulsive. Smells become overwhelming, sometimes provoking nausea. Cravings emerge, often for calorie-dense or salty foods, as the body seeks nutrients for the fetus. Sleep patterns shift as progesterone induces drowsiness and nocturnal discomfort interrupts rest. Mood swings are common as estrogen and progesterone tug at the emotional landscape, sometimes producing bursts of joy, other times tears without clear reason. To the person experiencing it, these shifts can feel bewildering, as if their personality has been temporarily rewritten. And in a sense it has. Hormones are sculpting the brain to prioritize caregiving, empathy, and vigilance, preparing for the demands of parenthood. The flood of hormones also affects memory and cognition. Many report pregnancy brain, a sense of forgetfulness or distraction. While sometimes joked about, studies suggest that changes in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex may indeed affect attention and memory. These alterations are not signs of decline, but of adaptation. The brain is reallocating resources, focusing on emotional attunement and environmental scanning rather than short-term recall. It is a trade-off, one that may enhance caregiving at the expense of remembering where the keys were placed. The sheer scale of hormonal change in pregnancy is almost impossible to grasp. Estrogen levels, for example, can rise to 100 times higher than at any other time in life. Progesterone reaches concentrations that would be considered abnormal in any non-pregnant state. The bloodstream becomes a cocktail of chemical signals, each influencing multiple systems, each adjusting in response to the others. It is not a single wave, but a constant tide, shifting and recalibrating as pregnancy progresses. By the third trimester, the body is practically awash in hormones, a living sea of messengers orchestrating the final stages of growth and preparation. This hormonal symphony is both beautiful and brutal. It enables pregnancy to succeed, but it also creates discomforts, from nausea to mood swings to fatigue. It can alter a sense of identity, making a person feel unlike themselves, as if their body and mind have been borrowed by another. Yet it also builds resilience, enhancing emotional bonds, preparing for the intensity of labor, and ensuring the newborn will be met with love and care. Hormones do not simply sustain pregnancy, they sculpt the experience of it. What makes this flood so extraordinary is that it requires no conscious control. The person carrying the pregnancy does not choose to release progesterone or increase estrogen. These decisions are made at the molecular level, dictated by placenta, ovaries, and brain, unfolding with perfect timing. It is a reminder that beneath our sense of autonomy lies a body that can reprogram itself entirely when life demands it. Hormones are the hidden composers of that reprogramming, the chemical notes that transform a familiar melody into something new and unrecognizable. Pregnancy is insane, not only because it shifts bones and organs, but because it rewrites personality, appetite, mood, and perception through the invisible power of hormones. To live inside a body undergoing such a transformation is to experience life on a scale few can imagine. One moment you may weep at a commercial, the next crave foods you once despised. The next find yourself awake at 3 a.m, unable to sleep. It is a tidal flood, overwhelming and miraculous, a symphony that plays for months and then gradually recedes after birth. And when it does, it leaves behind a changed body and a changed mind, echoes of the flood that reshaped everything. To understand pregnancy, you must understand this chemical storm. It is not a gentle stream, but a roaring river, carrying both parent and child toward the unknown. It is the reason pregnancy feels overwhelming and surreal, the reason it can feel like someone else has taken over, And in truth, someone has, the future child, speaking in the language of hormones, guiding the body toward birth. That is why pregnancy is insane. It is not just physical remodeling, but chemical reprogramming, a flood of hormones that turns one life into two. One of the most astonishing feats of pregnancy is not the swelling of the belly, not the stretching of skin, nor even the growth of a new organ like the placenta. It is the invisible engineering of blood itself, the miracle of two circulations flowing side by side, close enough to exchange everything needed for life, but never merging into one. Inside the womb, millimeters separate the blood of parent and child, and yet those millimeters hold the line between survival and disaster. It is a partnership that functions with astonishing precision, a biological compromise that makes pregnancy possible at all. Without this dual circulation, no human would be born. Blood is the river of life, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and chemical signals to every cell. But parent and child cannot share the same river. Their blood types may differ, their immune systems may clash, their pressures and flows may conflict. If the two bloodstreams touched directly, antibodies could attack, clotting could form, oxygen could be lost. And so evolution built a barrier, a microscopic wall of tissue between them. This wall is thin enough to allow molecules to cross, but thick enough to keep cells apart. Oxygen slips through, glucose and amino acids pass, waste products flow back, but the red and white blood cells themselves remain confined to their own circulations. In this way, two lives share one lifeline without ever mixing fluids. The place where this magic happens is the placenta. Its villi, finger-like projections bathed in maternal blood, act like docks where ferries of molecules cross from one circulation to the other. Imagine two highways running side by side, close enough that cars can toss packages across the divider, but never close enough for traffic to merge. That is the relationship between maternal and fetal blood. Oxygen leaves hemoglobin in the mother's red cells, drifts across membranes, and binds to fetal hemoglobin, which clutches it even tighter. Nutrients follow the same route, crossing gradients of concentration into fetal vessels. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide and waste products make the return trip, leaving the fetus and entering the maternal bloodstream to be exhaled or excreted. All of this happens continuously, silently, at a scale too small to see, but essential to life. What makes this dual circulation extraordinary is its efficiency. The placenta maximizes surface area with millions of microscopic villi, creating a vast landscape where exchange can occur. If you could flatten out all the villous surfaces, the area would cover several square meters, larger than a living room rug, all packed into an organ only a few pounds in weight. This efficiency ensures that even the tiniest concentration differences are enough to drive exchange. The fetus is, in a sense, scuba diving in amniotic fluid, but tethered to an umbilical cord that delivers oxygen and removes waste with flawless precision. The umbilical cord itself is a marvel of design. It contains two arteries and one vein, all cushioned in a gelatinous substance called Wharton's jelly, which protects the vessels from compression. The arteries carry deoxygenated blood away from the fetus to the placenta, while the vein carries oxygen-rich blood back in. This arrangement is the opposite of what most people expect. Arteries normally carry oxygenated blood, but in the fetal system, the roles are reversed. This three-vessel cord is the literal bridge between circulations, a lifeline twisting and coiling as the fetus moves, but rarely tangling fatally, protected by its jelly and sheath. Without it, the double circulation could not function. At the heart of this miracle is fetal hemoglobin, a specialized form of the oxygen-carrying protein that binds oxygen more tightly than adult hemoglobin does. This difference allows the fetus to pull oxygen across the placental wall even when maternal oxygen levels are not high. In effect, fetal blood steals oxygen from maternal blood with greater efficiency, ensuring that the developing child never suffocates. After birth, fetal hemoglobin gradually gives way to the adult form, but in the womb, it is the key to survival. It is another reminder of how pregnancy relies on solutions so elegant that they appear almost otherworldly. The separation of circulations also prevents immune catastrophe. If fetal blood entered maternal circulation in large amounts, the parent's immune system might recognize the fetus as foreign and mount an attack. In small quantities, some cells do cross, a phenomenon known as microchimerism, but the barrier prevents wholesale mixing. This separation keeps peace at the cellular level, a quiet truce that allows pregnancy to proceed. In rare cases where blood does mix, such as with trauma or certain complications, the risks become clear. Antibodies can form against fetal blood types, leading to hemolytic disease of the newborn. Modern medicine can mitigate this with injections of Rh immunoglobulin, but the fact that such a complication exists shows why the separation of circulations is normally so crucial. The elegance of this arrangement can be seen in how the fetus's entire cardiovascular system is adapted to it. The fetal heart pumps blood through shunts and bypasses that would make no sense in an adult body. The ductus venosus allows blood from the umbilical vein to flow directly to the liver and heart, skipping much of the circulation. The foramen ovale, a hole between the atria, lets blood flow from right to left, bypassing the lungs that are not yet in use. The ductus arteriosus diverts blood from the pulmonary artery to the aorta, again avoiding the lungs. These shortcuts only make sense in a body that receives oxygen not from breathing but from the placenta. After birth they close, transforming circulation into the adult pattern. But in the womb they are evidence of a system designed for double circulation, a reminder that the fetus lives in a world completely unlike our own. The sheer closeness of these circulations is staggering. The maternal and fetal bloodstreams flow within microns of each other, separated only by thin membranes of placental tissue. Molecules cross in seconds, a continuous exchange of life. Yet those same membranes hold firm against cells, pathogens, and large proteins. It is a balance between intimacy and distance, connection and protection. Two bodies are joined more closely than any other relationship in biology, and yet they remain separate, each with its own heart, its own vessels, its own flow. This duality extends into symbolism as well. To carry a child is to host another circulation within your own, to pump and breathe not just for yourself, but for another being whose blood never touches yours directly. You are both connected and distinct, united and divided. The miracle of two circulations explains why pregnancy can feel so surreal, why it seems like living in two worlds at once. One body contains another, one system sustains another, yet each remains itself. It is intimacy without merging, dependence without loss of identity. The miracle is also fragile. If placental exchange falters, growth slows, oxygen levels drop, and complications arise. Conditions like preeclampsia or placental insufficiency reveal how delicate this balance is. The double circulation is not indestructible. It is a tightrope walk that requires constant adjustment. And yet, in most pregnancies, it works flawlessly, month after month, until birth. That reliability, given the complexity, is what makes it insane in the best sense. Billions of molecular exchanges occur every hour, and nearly all succeed. At birth, the system undergoes its most dramatic transformation. When the umbilical cord is cut, the placental connection ends. The newborn must breathe, inflate its lungs, and establish its own oxygen supply. The shunts in the heart close, fetal hemoglobin gives way to adult hemoglobin, and circulation shifts permanently. The double circulation ends as suddenly as it began. What was once two blood supplies running in parallel becomes two independent lives, each with its own rhythm. The miracle is over, but it leaves behind the memory of a time when two hearts beat side by side, sustained by a bridge of blood that never mixed. Pregnancy is insane because of this hidden engineering. The idea that one body can host another without sharing blood directly, that nutrients and gases can cross a barrier without cells merging, that two circulations can coexist millimeters apart without chaos, is a feat of biology more remarkable than anything we could design. Machines clog, pumps fail, filters break. But the placenta and the umbilical cord sustain double circulation for months without faltering. It is as if nature built a perfect life support system long before humans ever dreamed of such technology. To imagine your own beginning is to imagine this strangeness. You floated in fluid, your lungs collapsed, your blood enriched by oxygen stolen across a placental barrier. You survived not by breathing but by connection, not by eating but by absorption. Your circulation was yours alone, but it was dependent on another. You were both independent and tethered, both yourself and not yet yourself. That is the paradox of double circulation. It is the miracle that allows humans to exist at all. Pregnancy is not gentle, nor is it simple. It is architecture and chemistry, remodeling and hormones, bones shifting and organs squeezed. But at its heart is this miracle of two blood supplies flowing side by side, close enough to share life, separate enough to preserve identity. That is why pregnancy feels impossible. It is not one circulation, but two. Not one life, but two, bound together by a bridge so thin it cannot be seen, yet so powerful it sustains the future. Inside the quiet world of the womb, something extraordinary unfolds, a process so complex and delicate that it remains one of the greatest marvels of biology. While bones harden, limbs stretch, and organs settle into place, the brain is busy crafting itself in darkness. It begins as a simple neural plate, a flat sheet of cells, and within weeks it folds and curls into a tube. From this humble beginning, billions of neurons will emerge, each sparking with electricity, each reaching out with branching arms called dendrites, each searching for partners to connect with. The womb is silent, yet it is filled with the hum of electrical signals, the invisible chatter of a brain forming itself before it ever experiences light. To understand why pregnancy is insane, you must appreciate what it means for a brain to grow in this hidden world. By the time most people realize they are pregnant, the embryo's nervous system is already under construction. Tiny clusters of cells along the back fold inward to form the neural tube, the scaffold that will become the spinal cord and brain. If this tube does not close properly, conditions like spina bifida occur, a reminder of how fragile the process is. Yet when it succeeds, the foundation for thought, memory, language and imagination is in place. From this tube, 3 bulges emerge, primitive brain regions that will one day govern movement, emotion and reasoning. What begins as a microscopic groove will become the seat of consciousness itself. The sheer scale of what follows is staggering. By the end of pregnancy, the fetal brain contains about 100 billion neurons, nearly the same number as an adult brain. Each neuron is capable of forming thousands of connections, meaning the potential number of synapses, the junctions where signals pass, is measured in quadrillions. This network is not built randomly. It is wired in precise sequences, guided by chemical cues and genetic programs. Growth factors signal neurons to divide, migrate and differentiate. Axons extend like growing vines, following molecular trails toward their targets. Synapses form and strengthen where signals are repeated, while unused ones wither away in a process called pruning. All of this unfolds in darkness, a construction project without blueprints, guided only by the wisdom of evolution. The first sparks of electrical activity appear astonishingly early. By 6 weeks, the neural tube shows rhythmic firing. These signals are not thoughts as we understand them, but primitive bursts, the earliest signs of a brain testing its circuits. By 8 weeks, reflexes emerge, tiny twitches that foreshadow movement. By mid-pregnancy, the cortex begins to organize into layers, each with specialized roles. Sensory neurons wire themselves to process sound, touch, taste, and light, even though those sensations are limited in the womb. Motor neurons map out pathways to muscles, rehearsing the patterns of kicking and grasping. The hippocampus, essential for memory, begins forming circuits that will later allow learning. All of this happens silently, invisibly, inside the protective walls of the uterus. The environment shapes this growth as much as genetics. The fetus is not isolated from the world. Sound vibrations travel through amniotic fluid. The muffled rhythm of the parent's heartbeat, the rush of blood through vessels, the rumble of digestion, the cadence of voices, all of these reach the developing brain. By the second trimester, the fetus can respond to these sounds, startling at loud noises or quieting at steady rhythms. Neurons in the auditory cortex strengthen their wiring in response, laying the groundwork for recognition of speech and music after birth. Studies have shown that newborns prefer their mother's voice and can recognize songs or stories read to them in the womb. Memory, in its earliest form, begins before birth. Touch also guides brain development. The fetus explores its environment with small hands, brushing against the uterine wall, grasping its own fingers, even sucking its thumb. These movements send feedback to the brain, strengthening motor and sensory pathways. The nervous system is not built in isolation, but through use, practice, and repetition. Every kick, every roll, every stretch is a kind of rehearsal, teaching neurons to communicate. Even taste and smell leave imprints. Flavors from the parent's diet seep into amniotic fluid, and the fetus swallows that fluid daily. Neurons in the gustatory system register these flavors, creating preferences that linger after birth. The first experiences of taste memory happen not at the dinner table, but floating in the womb. The brain also begins to regulate basic functions before birth. The brainstem controls heart rate and breathing movements, even though the lungs are not yet used. These rhythmic patterns are vital practice, ensuring that once air is available, the newborn can adapt instantly. The hypothalamus develops circuits for regulating body temperature and hormones. The thalamus begins to relay sensory information to the cortex, integrating signals into coherent patterns. Bit by bit, the fetal brain is not just growing, but preparing for the outside world, rehearsing in darkness for a debut into light. What makes this growth extraordinary is its speed. In the second trimester, up to 250,000 neurons can form every minute. Synapses multiply at an even faster rate. The brain is building itself at a pace that defies imagination, sculpting the architecture of thought with relentless energy. By the third trimester, it consumes a massive share of the fetus's oxygen and glucose, a hungry organ demanding constant supply. This hunger explains why the placenta's efficiency is so critical. Without flawless circulation, the brain's rapid construction could falter. Pregnancy is insane, not just because a body grows another body, but because it grows a brain, an organ capable of language, music, art and science, without ever seeing the world it is preparing for. Inside the womb, sleep also begins. Fetuses show cycles of quiet and active states, resembling REM sleep in adults. During these active states, the eyes move beneath closed lids, and brain activity surges. Some scientists believe this is when the brain is practicing, strengthening neural pathways, rehearsing patterns it will need later. Sleep in the womb is not rest, but work, a time when neurons fire in coordinated bursts, laying down the rhythms that will structure future thought. In a sense, dreaming begins before birth, though we cannot know what those dreams might be. They are likely not images or stories, but patterns of sensation, echoes of heartbeat and motion, fragments of sound. Still, they are the first stirrings of a mind becoming itself. Hormones also shape the developing brain. Cortisol, the stress hormone, can cross the placenta, influencing fetal neural circuits. Too much or too little can alter outcomes, which is why maternal stress is studied so closely. Estrogen and progesterone, abundant during pregnancy, influence brain growth, synapse formation, and neurotransmitter systems. The cocktail of hormones flooding both parent and child does more than sustain pregnancy. It tunes the architecture of the brain itself. Even here, the fetus is not isolated but entangled in the parent's physiology, its neurons sculpted by chemistry shared across the placental divide. As birth approaches, the brain enters its final preparations. Giri and sulci, the folds that give the brain its wrinkled appearance, deepen, expanding surface area for cortical processing. Myelination, the coating of neurons with fatty insulation, accelerates, speeding up communication. Circuits for vision, though unused, are wired and waiting. Circuits for movement, refined through months of kicking, are ready for the challenge of gravity. The fetus rehearses breathing, drawing amniotic fluid into the lungs and pushing it out again, guided by neural circuits that will soon regulate air. The brain is not finished. It will continue to grow and refine for decades, but it is ready enough for the first cry. What makes this story so profound is that it happens in complete darkness. The fetus never sees the world it is preparing to interpret. It never breathes the air it is practicing to inhale. It never tastes food directly, yet it remembers flavors. It never speaks a word, yet its neurons are already tuned to the cadence of language. The brain grows in anticipation, building a model of reality it has not yet encountered. That leap of preparation, that blind faith of biology, is astonishing. It is as if an orchestra tunes its instruments in a silent hall, preparing for a concert that has never been played before. When you think about your own beginning, you realize that you too once floated in silence, neurons sparking in the dark, connections forming without your awareness. Your preferences, your memories, your capacity to learn were shaped before you ever opened your eyes. You were already building the foundations of your mind before you could experience the world it would interpret. This is why pregnancy is not just physical, but existential. It is the creation of thought itself, the growth of a brain that will carry a lifetime of memories, all assembled in the hidden architecture of the womb. Pregnancy is insane because it grows not only muscles and bones, but also consciousness. It is the only time in human life when a mind builds itself from scratch, unobserved, unmeasured, but unstoppable. Billions of neurons, trillions of synapses, all assembled in the dark, guided by chemistry, sound, and movement. Out of that silence emerges the capacity to love, to learn, to create, to dream. The miracle of growing a brain in the dark is not just biological, but poetic. Proof that the most profound beginnings happen unseen. When people imagine a fetus inside the womb, they often picture a floating figure wrapped in silence and darkness, suspended in some blank void until the moment of birth. But this is a misconception. The womb is not a vacuum. It is alive with sensations. Even before entering the outside world, the developing child begins to hear, taste, smell, and even respond to light. Senses awaken one by one in the protective cocoon of amniotic fluid, shaping the earliest experiences of life. Pregnancy is not only about growing a body and wiring a brain, it is about preparing for perception, creating a being ready to meet the world with eyes, ears, and tongue already tuned. Hearing begins first, long before most people realize. By about 18 weeks of gestation, the auditory system is already functional enough for the fetus to detect vibrations. The ear structures, tiny ossicles in the middle ear, the cochlea curled like a snail shell, and the auditory nerve connecting to the brain are all forming and refining themselves. Sound does not reach the fetus in crisp clarity. Instead, it arrives muffled, filtered through layers of tissue, fluid, and muscle. But it is sound nonetheless. And it is constant. The womb is filled with the rhythm of the parent's heartbeat, a steady drum that plays around the clock. It is joined by the rushing of blood through vessels, the gurgling of digestion, the whoosh of breath. This symphony of internal noise is the fetus's first concert, a lullaby of bodily rhythms that shape its earliest sense of the world. As weeks pass, external sounds begin to make their way inside. Voices penetrate the barrier, softened but still recognizable in tone and rhythm. Music, speech, laughter, even environmental sounds like a barking dog or clattering dishes can be perceived. Studies show that fetuses react to loud noises with startled movements, and they calm in response to gentle rhythmic sounds. More remarkably, they can learn. If a parent reads the same story aloud during pregnancy, the newborn will recognize and prefer that story after birth. If a melody is played repeatedly in the womb, the infant will show signs of familiarity with it outside. This is memory in its earliest form, a kind of sensory imprinting that begins months before birth. The sense of hearing is not idle, it is shaping preferences, preparing the infant to recognize voices and rhythms in the outside world. Taste and smell awaken through amniotic fluid. Though the fetus does not eat in the conventional sense, it swallows and digests fluid throughout pregnancy. That fluid is not bland. It carries molecules from the parent's diet, garlic, carrots, vanilla, spices, that flavor the amniotic environment. Neurons in the taste buds and olfactory system respond to these molecules, creating sensations of flavor and scent. Fetuses show preference for sweet tastes, swallowing more fluid when it is sweetened, and less when it is bitter. This preference persists after birth, explaining why newborns are soothed by sweet solutions. More fascinating still, exposure to flavors in utero can shape lifelong food preferences. Infants whose parents ate certain foods during pregnancy are more likely to accept those flavors later. In this way, the sense of taste is not just developing, it is already learning, preparing the child to adapt to the cultural diet of the family into which they will be born. Touch is another early sense, present by about 8 weeks of gestation. The fetus begins by responding to contact with its own skin, twitching when touched. As nerves develop, sensitivity increases, spreading across the body. Hands explore, brushing against the uterine wall, grasping the umbilical cord, touching the face. These movements are not random. They are exercises that refine motor control and sensory feedback. Thumb sucking begins in the womb, a behavior that soothes the fetus and rehearses the motions needed for feeding after birth. Twins have even been observed interacting with each other in utero, reaching out and making contact, early gestures of social touch. In darkness, touch becomes the first way of mapping the self and the environment, the first way the developing brain learns what it means to have a body. Vision develops last, delayed by the protective darkness of the womb. Yet even here, light makes its presence known. By the second trimester, the eyelids, fused shut until around 26 weeks, begin to open. The retina, sensitive to photons, can detect light filtering through the abdominal wall. Bright sunlight, shining directly on the belly, can be perceived as a glow. Experiments have shown that fetuses turn their heads toward light shone on the abdomen, responding even in utero to visual stimulation. The patterns are dim and vague, but they are enough to stimulate the developing visual system, enough to prepare the brain for the flood of light that will come at birth. By the final trimester, the eyes can move in coordinated patterns, showing evidence of REM sleep and visual rehearsal. In complete darkness, the brain simulates images, laying the groundwork for vision before it is ever tested. The awakening of senses before birth is not just preparation, it is survival. Hearing the parent's voice creates familiarity that calms the newborn. Recognizing flavors creates a bridge between prenatal and postnatal diets. Practicing touch and movement strengthens muscles for birth. Detecting light primes the eyes for the sudden brilliance of the outside world. The womb is not a blank space, but a classroom, a place where senses awaken and begin their training. This training also extends to balance. The inner ear, with its semicircular canals filled with fluid, develops to sense motion. As the parent moves, walks, or shifts, the fetus experiences gentle rocking. These movements stimulate the vestibular system, teaching it how to register motion and equilibrium. Newborns are soothed by rocking not by coincidence, but because it echoes the sensations they knew in utero. The sense of balance is rehearsed in the womb, shaped by months of swaying and shifting, ready to guide the infant through the challenge of gravity after birth. What makes this sensory awakening extraordinary is that it happens without conscious awareness. The fetus does not choose to hear or taste or touch. The senses simply activate as neurons wire themselves. It is automatic, yet it is also adaptive. The fetus is not passive, but actively responding, swallowing more or less fluid, startling at loud sounds, turning toward light, sucking a thumb. These responses show that the senses are not dormant but engaged, shaping behavior and brain wiring before birth. The womb is often imagined as silent darkness, but the reality is closer to a sensory symphony. Heartbeats, voices, digestion, light, motion, flavor, all of these flood the fetus's world. And from this world, preferences, habits, and even early memories emerge. Pregnancy is insane, not just because it creates a body and brain, but because it creates a sensory being before that being ever enters the world. The child is already listening, tasting, touching, seeing, and remembering in the secret world of the womb. To reflect on your own beginning is to realize that you, too, once listened to muffled voices, tasted flavors from your parents' meals, turned toward light, sucked your thumb, and practiced movement in fluid. You experienced the world before you could name it. Your brain was wired by sensations you will never consciously remember, but which shaped you nonetheless. That is why pregnancy is so astonishing. It is not a waiting period, but an active rehearsal, a sensory education that begins long before birth. When birth comes, the sensory world explodes. Light floods the eyes, sound sharpens, touch becomes constant, taste and smell become direct. But none of this is truly new. It is an amplification of what was already rehearsed in the womb. The senses do not awaken at birth. They emerge months earlier, growing in the dark, preparing for the moment when the world will finally open. That is the secret of pregnancy. It does not only build a body, it builds a perceiver, a creature already listening, tasting, feeling, and seeing, waiting for its first breath. Pregnancy is often described as exhausting, overwhelming, and even disorienting, but hidden beneath the discomfort and fatigue lies something stranger: superpowers. They are not the kind of abilities comic books imagine. No one suddenly flies or shoots lightning from their hands, but subtle biological powers that seem almost supernatural. Heightened senses of smell, changes in immunity that defy logic, and the astonishing reality that fetal cells can live inside the parent for decades are all part of this surreal chapter of human biology. It is as if pregnancy pulls back the curtain on the body's hidden potential, revealing powers that only appear when another life is being sustained within. The first of these so-called superpowers is the sharpened sense of smell. Many pregnant people report detecting odors with an intensity that feels exaggerated, sometimes overwhelming. Perfumes, cleaning supplies, smoke, and even foods once enjoyed can suddenly seem unbearable. At the same time, subtle scents, like the faint sweetness of fruit or the freshness of rain, may appear amplified. This phenomenon, known as hyperosmia, has been documented in countless studies. Though scientists still debate its evolutionary purpose, one prevailing theory is that it acts as a protective mechanism. By sharpening olfactory sensitivity, the body may help detect spoiled food, toxins, or environmental hazards more quickly. In an ancestral world where survival depended on avoiding poisonous plants or tainted meat, this ability could save lives. What feels like an annoyance in modern kitchens may once have been a crucial shield against danger. Taste shifts accompany this heightened smell. Foods that once seemed appealing can suddenly be repulsive, while cravings for unexpected combinations arise. Some people report aversions to coffee, alcohol, or heavily spiced meals, while developing an appetite for sour fruits, salty snacks, or even non-food items in rare cases. These changes are not random. They are driven by hormones and possibly by subtle cues from the fetus itself, guiding the body toward nutrients that are needed and away from substances that could be harmful. It is as if pregnancy unlocks a sixth sense, an internal compass that steers behavior in ways too nuanced to be explained by conscious choice. Beyond the senses, the immune system undergoes one of the strangest transformations in biology. Under normal circumstances, the immune system's job is clear: identify and destroy anything foreign. Yet pregnancy demands the opposite. The fetus is genetically distinct, carrying half of its DNA from another person. By all rights, the immune system should attack it as an invader. Instead, it is reprogrammed to tolerate the fetus while still protecting the parent from infection. This balancing act is so delicate that researchers still struggle to fully explain how it works. One mechanism involves specialized immune cells called regulatory T cells, which expand during pregnancy to suppress aggressive responses. These cells act like peacekeepers, ensuring the fetus is not targeted. At the same time, the immune system shifts focus, strengthening defenses against certain pathogens while lowering vigilance against others. This is why pregnant people may be more vulnerable to illnesses like influenza, but more resistant to some autoimmune conditions. In fact, diseases such as rheumatoid arthritis and multiple sclerosis often improve during pregnancy, as the immune system suppresses the very reactions that normally fuel those conditions. This temporary reprieve is one of pregnancy's strangest gifts, a glimpse of how immunity can be recalibrated in ways medicine still dreams of replicating. But perhaps the most bizarre and least understood pregnancy superpower is microchimerism. This phenomenon occurs when fetal cells cross the placental barrier and take up residence in the parent's body. These cells, genetically distinct from the host, can migrate to organs like the heart, liver, kidneys, and even the brain. Once there, they may persist for decades, long after the pregnancy has ended. This means that a mother may carry living fragments of her child's biology within her for the rest of her life. The implications are staggering. Some studies suggest that these fetal cells may help repair tissue, aiding in healing after injury. Others indicate they might contribute to disease, potentially linked to autoimmune conditions where the immune system attacks the body's own tissues. Microchimerism blurs the boundary between parent and child, creating a lasting biological connection that challenges the very definition of individuality. You are not just yourself, but a mosaic of cells, some of which may belong to your children, and the exchange is not one way. Maternal cells can also enter the fetus, meaning each child may carry remnants of their mother within them. Families are not just connected by memory or bloodlines, but by actual cells intermingled across bodies. Consider the poetry of this. Long after a pregnancy has ended, long after a child has grown, echoes of that child still remain within the parent's body, quietly living, dividing, perhaps repairing, perhaps complicating. It is a reminder that pregnancy is not a temporary event, but a permanent transformation. It leaves traces in the architecture of the body that endure for decades, invisible yet profound. To think that fragments of your own beginning might still be circulating in your parents' blood or embedded in their organs is to realize how entangled human life really is. Pregnancy also grants subtler powers that defy easy explanation. Some report sharper intuition, heightened awareness of social cues, or changes in memory and focus that seem tailored for caregiving. Neuroimaging has shown structural changes in the brain that support empathy and vigilance, suggesting that these shifts are not imagined but rooted in biology. The so-called pregnancy brain, often joked about as forgetfulness, may actually be a rewiring of priorities, trading short-term recall for heightened emotional sensitivity. It is another example of how the body adapts not just physically but mentally, optimizing for the survival of the child. The cardiovascular system also demonstrates superhuman adaptability. Blood volume increases by nearly 50%, requiring the heart to pump harder and faster. Arteries dilate, veins expand, and the body sustains this expanded circulation for months without collapse. Few machines could handle such a sudden increase in workload without breaking down. Yet the human body does routinely, quietly, as if it were nothing unusual. The ability to expand and contract circulation on this scale is itself a kind of hidden superpower, one that allows life to be sustained in the most demanding conditions. Even the skin and connective tissue reveal extraordinary flexibility. Collagen fibers stretch, sometimes to the point of tearing, to accommodate expansion. Melanocytes respond to hormones by altering pigmentation, creating visible lines and patterns that map the body's transformation. These changes may not feel like powers, but they are evidence of a body capable of remodeling itself at a pace that defies normal limits. Skin, bones, joints, blood vessels, and muscles all bend to the will of pregnancy, adapting in ways that no conscious effort could replicate. When you look at the whole picture, pregnancy appears less like a passive state and more like a state of altered biology, an enhanced mode of being. Senses sharpen, immunity recalibrates, circulation expands, tissues stretch, and cells migrate between bodies. These are not trivial shifts, they are feats that border on the miraculous. No wonder people describe pregnancy as surreal, overwhelming, even otherworldly. It is quite literally a superhuman condition, one that transforms biology in ways science is only beginning to understand. Pregnancy is insane, not only because it grows a new human, but because it unlocks powers that challenge our understanding of what bodies can do. It creates a person with heightened senses, flexible immunity, and the ability to host living fragments of another being indefinitely. It turns ordinary bodies into mosaics of multiple lives, reshaping perception, physiology, and even the boundaries of self. To walk through the world while carrying another circulation, while smelling scents more sharply than ever before, while housing cells that will live inside you for decades, is to live with powers that feel almost magical. When you reflect on your own beginning, you realize that you were not just a passenger in the womb. You were already altering the body that carried you, sending cells across the placenta, reshaping hormones, demanding nutrients, and leaving behind traces of yourself. You became part of another body in ways that still echo years later. That is why pregnancy cannot be described as ordinary. It is a transformation into a state of superpowers, a condition where biology bends the rules, where individuality blurs, where the line between self and other dissolves. It is at once beautiful, strange, and unsettling, and it is the only way any of us ever came to be. Pregnancy is, at its heart, an experiment in energy. A body that once consumed food to sustain one life must suddenly fuel two, and not two in equal balance, but one fully grown organism and one rapidly expanding passenger whose needs grow heavier every single day. This shift turns ordinary metabolism into something extraordinary. Digestion slows, hormones twist the rules of blood sugar, fat is hoarded and then spent, and appetite takes on rhythms that feel alien. To live through pregnancy is to live in a body whose energy economy has been rewritten, an economy where every calorie is accounted for, every nutrient redirected, and every bite of food serves not just the eater, but the hidden builder within. The story begins with metabolism, the constant hum of chemical reactions that transform food into usable energy. In early pregnancy, the body seems to speed up, burning more calories even at rest. Fatigue can set in, not because less energy is available, but because so much energy is being diverted toward growth. The placenta is forming. The embryo's organs are beginning to shape themselves, and this surge requires fuel. At the same time, progesterone and other hormones begin altering digestion, slowing the muscular contractions of the intestines so food lingers longer. This slowdown is strategic. By holding food in the gut for more time, the body extracts every possible nutrient. What feels like bloating or constipation is, in fact, an efficiency upgrade, ensuring nothing goes to waste in the energy economy of pregnancy. As the weeks progress, appetite begins to shift. Some days hunger feels insatiable, a gnawing demand that arrives with surprising urgency. On other days, nausea or aversions make eating nearly impossible. These swings are not random. They reflect the complex tug-of-war between hormones like HCG, which can suppress appetite, and metabolic demands, which increase it. Cravings often seem bizarre: pickles with ice cream, sour fruits, salty snacks. But many contain nutrients the body requires. Salt replenishes sodium lost through expanded blood volume. Citrus offers vitamin C. Red meat or leafy greens deliver iron to support new red blood cells. Even if the cravings seem irrational, they are often guided by hidden logic, an evolutionary nudge steering the body toward balance. By mid-pregnancy, metabolism undergoes its most striking transformation. The placenta begins secreting human placental lactogen, a hormone that alters the parent's sensitivity to insulin. Normally, insulin helps cells absorb glucose from the bloodstream. But in pregnancy, tissues become resistant, refusing to take in as much sugar. This resistance ensures that more glucose remains in the blood, ready to be shuttled across the placenta to the fetus. In essence, the body hacks its own sugar regulation, prioritizing the passenger over the host. For most, this adjustment is seamless, but in some cases it tips too far, leading to gestational diabetes. Here, the energy economy shows both its brilliance and its fragility. A system designed to feed a fetus can also strain the balance of health. The fetus, for its part, is a demanding consumer. By the third trimester, it requires thousands of calories per day in the form of glucose, amino acids, and fats. Oxygen and sugar flow constantly across the placenta, fueling the growth of brain, bones, and muscles. Protein builds tissues, while calcium is drawn from the parent's diet, and sometimes even from their bones, to harden the skeleton. Fat is stockpiled beneath the fetal skin, insulation for the harsh outside world. Every meal eaten during pregnancy becomes a transaction, nutrients absorbed and divided between two bodies. The parent may feel hungry again soon after eating, not because the food was inadequate, but because the passenger claimed the lion's share. This redistribution changes the way the body stores energy. Early in pregnancy, fat is deposited in hips, thighs, and abdomen, a reserve built for later. By the final trimester, those reserves are drawn upon, released into the bloodstream, and converted into fuel. The parent's body essentially becomes a banker, saving early and spending late, ensuring that the fetus has a steady supply even if food intake fluctuates. This is why pregnancy weight gain is not just about the fetus itself, but about creating reserves. Amniotic fluid, placenta, expanded blood volume, and stored fat all add to the total. Each pound represents energy or infrastructure for the developing child. The cardiovascular system supports this economy by doubling its workload. Blood volume rises by nearly half, plasma expands, and red blood cells increase to carry more oxygen. This expanded river of blood delivers glucose and nutrients to the placenta continuously. The heart beats faster, pushing this enriched supply through vessels that have softened and widened under hormonal influence. The kidneys filter this flood, working overtime to excrete waste, while also managing electrolyte balance to keep circulation stable. Every organ is recruited into the energy economy, from liver to lungs to thyroid, each adjusting its function to serve two. The thyroid itself speeds up, releasing hormones that increase basal metabolic rate. This acceleration boosts the pace of energy conversion, raising body temperature slightly and explaining why many pregnant people feel warmer than usual. Even at rest, the body burns more fuel, a constant furnace keeping both lives nourished. This heightened metabolism is a delicate balance. Too little thyroid activity can stall growth, while too much can overstimulate. Once again, the energy economy demonstrates both its precision and its risks. Iron becomes one of the most critical currencies in this system. Hemoglobin, the protein that carries oxygen in red blood cells, requires iron. With blood volume expanded, the demand for iron skyrockets. Without enough, anemia develops, leaving the parent fatigued, dizzy, or weak. But when iron is sufficient, oxygen flows abundantly, feeding both hearts, both brains, both sets of tissues. In this way, every nutrient, iron, calcium, folate, protein, fat, becomes currency, spent wisely or wasted at peril. The fetus is not shy in claiming its share, drawing minerals even from the skeleton if dietary intake falls short. The parent's body becomes both provider and protector, often sacrificing its own reserves to keep the passenger growing. This energy economy even reshapes sleep. Fatigue dominates the first trimester as energy is diverted toward building the placenta. Later, discomfort, hormone fluctuations, and frequent urination fragment rest. The body cycles between exhaustion and bursts of energy, rhythms tuned to the shifting demands of growth. What feels like insomnia or lethargy is really the body budgeting energy, prioritizing tasks that matter most to sustaining two lives. When labor arrives, the energy economy faces its greatest demand. Contractions require enormous fuel, muscles working at maximum intensity for hours. Glucose floods into the bloodstream, fat stores are mobilized, and oxygen demand peaks. The body burns through its reserves in a final marathon, expending energy at a pace few athletes could match. This is the climax of the energy economy, the ultimate proof of what it has been building toward. Afterward, lactation begins, another energy-hungry process that demands hundreds of extra calories each day, a continuation of the economy's work now redirected to milk production. Looking at this system as a whole, the insanity of pregnancy becomes clear. Metabolism bends itself around another being. Digestion slows, insulin resistance rises, blood volume doubles, fat is hoarded and spent, cravings sharpen, and nutrients are pulled from every available source. The parent's body does not simply share, it reorganizes, sacrifices, and prioritizes with a single goal: to keep the fetus alive and growing. It is an economy that operates with ruthless efficiency, sometimes at the expense of comfort, sometimes at the expense of health, but always with survival in mind. To reflect on your own beginning is to realize that you too once thrived on this system. You were nourished by slowed digestion, by glucose held in the bloodstream, by calcium borrowed from bones, by iron carried in expanded blood. Every bite your parent took became the foundation of your cells. Every ounce of energy they saved or spent was a deposit in your future. You were the central figure in an economy you never knew existed, a consumer sustained by the most elaborate redistribution biology has ever devised. Pregnancy is insane not only because it builds a body, but because it builds an economy where blood is currency, hormones are regulators, and every system is bent toward the needs of one passenger. It is capitalism of cells, socialism of nutrients, a budget balanced on the edge of survival. And yet it works again and again, turning ordinary food into extraordinary growth. To live inside that system is to live in a body transformed into a marketplace of energy, a reminder that life begins not with independence, but with dependence on a host willing to rewrite itself entirely for the sake of another. Pregnancy is the closest biology comes to alchemy. Out of food, water, and borrowed reserves, the body does not only grow flesh and skin, but the hard scaffolding of a new skeleton, the enamel of tiny future teeth, and the liquid river of blood that will sustain a newborn's life. It is a construction project on a scale that feels impossible, and yet it happens invisibly, without conscious effort, inside a womb that becomes both workshop and forge. Every bone, every red cell, every mineralized tooth bud is formed from resources pulled directly from the parent's body, sometimes at a cost that leaves permanent traces. To build one skeleton, another must lend its stores. To fill one bloodstream, another must share its iron. This quiet exchange is both miraculous and merciless, a process that shows why pregnancy is so often described as insane. The skeletal system begins with cartilage. In early development, the fetus's body is more flexible, a framework of soft tissue that can bend and stretch as cells divide. Gradually, calcium and phosphorus are deposited, hardening cartilage into bone. This process, called ossification, is relentless. By the second trimester, tiny bones are already visible on ultrasound, a spine curving in miniature, ribs fanning outward, limbs forming joints that will one day bend and grasp. Each of these bones requires calcium, a mineral that must come from somewhere. The placenta ferries it across from the maternal bloodstream, where it is drawn from diet, or if necessary, from the parent's own skeleton. In effect, the body becomes a quarry, mining its own stores of calcium to ensure that the fetus has enough to lay down its skeleton. The demand grows exponentially as pregnancy progresses. By the third trimester, when bones are hardening rapidly, the fetus requires hundreds of milligrams of calcium each day. Teeth begin to calcify within the gums, long before they will erupt in the first year of life. Even though those teeth will not be used for months, their foundation is already set. Each molar, incisor, and canine is sculpted in silence, borrowing minerals from the parent's diet or bones. If calcium intake is insufficient, the parent's skeleton is tapped, leaving bones slightly thinner, sometimes permanently altered. The myth that pregnancy can weaken teeth has some truth to it. Not because the fetus steals the teeth themselves, but because the body diverts resources toward construction at all costs. Iron becomes just as critical, not for bone, but for blood. The fetus must build its own circulatory system, a complete network of arteries, veins, and capillaries filled with red cells. Red cells carry oxygen through hemoglobin, and hemoglobin requires iron. To sustain this, the parent's body expands blood volume by nearly half, producing more red cells for both itself and the child. The placenta then transfers iron across its barrier, ensuring the fetus has the raw material to manufacture billions of red cells of its own. Each beat of the fetal heart pumps blood enriched with stolen iron, every drop borrowed from another circulation. If dietary intake is too low, iron is pulled from the parent's reserves, and anemia can follow, leaving the parent dizzy, fatigued, and weak. The fetus, however, continues to thrive, a reminder that nature prioritizes survival of the new over comfort of the existing. This redistribution is not limited to calcium and iron. Magnesium, phosphorus, zinc, copper, and countless other minerals are funneled across the placenta to build enzymes, bone matrices, and connective tissue. Vitamin D helps regulate calcium absorption. Folate and B vitamins ensure proper formation of blood cells and the neural tube. Each nutrient becomes part of the supply chain, a microscopic shipment delivered to the growing passenger. The parent becomes both warehouse and distributor, their body reorganized into a system that allocates resources toward growth with relentless precision. The circulatory system of the fetus is a masterpiece of rapid construction. Within weeks, the primitive heart tube begins to beat, pumping fluid through a simple loop. Soon chambers form, valves open and close, and the flow becomes more complex. Arteries branch, veins return, and capillaries spread into tissues. By the end of pregnancy, the fetal heart is pumping at a rate of 110 to 160 beats per minute, far faster than an adult's, sustaining a circulatory system that mirrors but does not yet match what it will be after birth. Specialized shunts, like the ductus venosus and foramen oval, reroute blood in patterns that only make sense in the context of the placenta. These pathways will close after the first breath, but until then, they represent a circulatory system engineered for a life lived in water, fueled by another's lungs. To build this system, iron is not the only demand. Protein supplies the amino acids for hemoglobin, plasma proteins, and vessel walls. Vitamin K, transferred through the placenta, is necessary for clotting factors. Without it, blood would not coagulate properly. Copper assists in the cross-linking of collagen and elastin, strengthening vessel walls. Even cholesterol, often demonized outside of pregnancy, becomes essential, serving as a building block for cell membranes and steroid hormones. Every nutrient plays a role, every molecule part of the invisible blueprint for bones, teeth, and blood. What makes this construction so remarkable is the cost. The parent's body often sacrifices to ensure success. Calcium is drawn from bones, iron from blood, protein from muscles, fat from reserves. Teeth may feel looser because ligaments soften under hormonal influence, and the perception of dental fragility arises from this combined strain. Joints ache as minerals are redirected. Fatigue deepens as iron stores thin. Yet the fetus continues to grow, shielded from shortage by a system that prioritizes it ruthlessly. Evolution built this mechanism because survival of the child is survival of the species, but for the individual, it can mean depletion that takes months or years to recover. The skeleton being built in utero is more than miniature bones. It is a system calibrated for growth. Bones remain softer and more flexible than adult ones, allowing for rapid lengthening after birth. Teeth form beneath the gums, primary teeth ready to erupt in infancy, permanent teeth budding silently for years later. This foresight is staggering. Pregnancy not only prepares a child for the first months of life, but also lays the foundation for years ahead. The blood system, too, is primed for transition. Fetal hemoglobin binds oxygen more tightly than adult hemoglobin, an adaptation that ensures efficient transfer across the placenta. After birth, this special hemoglobin will gradually be replaced, but in the womb it is a supercharged version of oxygen transport, designed for survival in an environment without breath. The architecture of bone, tooth, and blood also ties parent and child together in ways that last. Microchimerism, the migration of fetal cells into the parent's body, means that bone-building cells may cross and settle in the parent's marrow. Decades later, fragments of those early exchanges may still exist, a cellular echo of the pregnancy. Likewise, maternal antibodies cross the placenta, entering the fetal bloodstream and offering protection against disease in the first months of life. These antibodies are not permanent, but they represent another form of borrowed strength, a way of lending immunity across the boundary of circulations. The fetus receives not only nutrients, but the very tools to fight infection, a temporary shield crafted from another's immune history. Even the way bones are nourished in the womb reveals the strange priorities of pregnancy. Calcium transport is actively regulated, with special channels in the placenta pulling the mineral across even when maternal levels are low. The fetus rarely suffers from lack of calcium because the parent's body will demineralize itself to make up the difference. Teeth are less protected, their enamel weaker if nutrition falters, because evolution has placed its bets on skeletal survival. It is another example of ruthless economy. Survival first, comfort later. When you reflect on this, the insanity of pregnancy becomes clear. Out of a body that was once stable and self-contained, a new skeleton is carved, new teeth crystallized, new blood churned into being. Calcium migrates across tissues, iron is siphoned from reserves, oxygen flows into another bloodstream. A heart that once pumped for one now pumps for two, circulating minerals and molecules in a cycle of giving and taking. Every bone in your body, every tooth in your mouth, every drop of blood in your veins was built this way, borrowed from another's reserves, crafted in the dark of the womb. It is easy to overlook the strangeness of it because it happens invisibly, without ceremony. But to pause and imagine it is to glimpse biology at its most astonishing. Two skeletons coexisting, one fully grown, one assembling itself piece by piece. Two blood systems running in parallel, one sustaining the other, each with its own rhythm. Teeth forming in silence, tiny white crescents hidden beneath the gums, waiting for a world they have never tasted. All of it made possible by the transfer of minerals and molecules from one body to another, an unending flow of resources that turns ordinary meals into extraordinary structures. Pregnancy is insane because it is not only the growth of life but the construction of infrastructure, bones, teeth, blood, that will endure for decades. It is building the framework of a future human out of the resources of another. It is sacrifice written in calcium, fatigue written in iron, legacy written in enamel and marrow. And it happens quietly, invisibly, beneath the surface of everyday life. To understand it is to understand that none of us began as isolated beings. We were all, at our core, constructed from borrowed molecules, skeletons forged from another's bones, blood spun from another's iron, teeth crystallized from another's diet. We are mosaics of their sacrifice, walking reminders of the strange and miraculous economy of pregnancy. Pregnancy is often measured in weeks and months, but for many people the true timeline begins the first time they feel movement from within. That flutter, sometimes mistaken for gas or digestion, is the earliest sign that the passenger hidden inside is no longer just growing silently, but beginning to act, to stretch, to kick. These movements will become stronger, sharper, and more insistent as the weeks pass, transforming pregnancy from an invisible secret into a constant physical dialogue. What feels like a tap or a push against the belly is not random. It is exercise, rehearsal, the most important biological workout a fetus will ever perform. Muscles, reflexes, and coordination are being sculpted by these months of weightless kicks, a training regimen that ensures survival when gravity and breath take over. In the beginning, fetal movement is barely detectable. Around 16 to 20 weeks, the parent may notice soft flutters known as quickening. These gentle sensations are the first hints of an entire world of activity that has already been underway for weeks. Inside the womb, the fetus has been twitching and shifting since the nervous system wired its earliest reflexes. Limbs jerk, fingers curl, the body bends and turns. At first, these movements are uncontrolled, the product of electrical impulses firing through immature circuits. But with time, they become purposeful. A kick here, a roll there, a stretch that arches the spine. Each one is a step toward mastery of a body that must soon enter the world. Amniotic fluid makes this practice possible. Floating in a cushion of liquid, the fetus experiences something like zero gravity. There is no weight pressing on joints, no friction from the ground. Movement is easier, freer, almost effortless. In this state of buoyancy, muscles can develop without strain. Legs kick outward and return, arms sweep across, the whole body rotates and tumbles like an astronaut in orbit. These rehearsals strengthen muscle fibers, improve coordination, and build endurance. Without them, the fetus would be weak at birth, unprepared for the sudden demands of breathing, feeding, and moving against gravity. The womb is both cradle and gym, a space designed for weightless training. By mid-pregnancy, kicks are strong enough to be felt on the outside. Partners can place a hand on the belly and feel a push, a tiny foot or elbow pressing outward. These moments create connection, proof that life inside is active and real. For the fetus, they are more than gestures. They are practice for reflexes that will be critical later. Stretching arms and legs teaches the nervous system to control range of motion. Kicking against the uterine wall provides resistance, strengthening joints and muscles. Sucking a thumb refines coordination between mouth and hand, laying the groundwork for feeding. Even hiccups, those rhythmic spasms that often amuse or annoy, are exercises for the diaphragm, rehearsals for the act of breathing. Fetal movement is also communication. Sudden kicks in response to loud noises show that the auditory system is connected to motor responses. Calming rhythms of movement when the parent speaks or sings demonstrate recognition and preference. Changes in activity with the time of day hint at emerging circadian rhythms. Though not language in any conscious sense, these patterns are signs of integration, evidence that the senses and motor systems are beginning to work together. The fetus is not only moving but responding, adapting, and practicing interaction with the environment. For the parent, these movements are both joy and discomfort. They are a reminder of life inside, a reassurance that the baby is active. But as the fetus grows, kicks can become sharp and insistent, pressing against ribs or bladder, jolting during the night. What feels like playful taps at 20 weeks can feel like forceful jabs at 30 weeks, strong enough to distort the belly's surface. Yet even these uncomfortable moments have purpose. Strong kicks demonstrate neurological health and muscular development. Doctors use fetal activity as a measure of well-being. Sudden decreases in movement can signal distress. Every kick, every roll, every turn is part of a diagnostic language, a way the fetus communicates health long before words are possible. The biological importance of these weightless months cannot be overstated. Muscles grow in strength and tone, reflexes sharpen, bones harden through constant pressure and release. Without movement, development falters. Conditions that restrict space in the womb or reduce fluid levels can lead to weaker muscles and stiffer joints. Movement is not just practice, it is essential. It sculpts the body, primes the lungs, and strengthens the heart. Every motion is a lesson, every stretch a step toward readiness. The choreography of these movements changes with time. Early on, they are small and scattered, unpredictable twitches in a spacious womb. As the fetus grows, movements become more coordinated, with kicks and rolls that follow patterns. By the third trimester, space grows tight, and movements shift from flips and tumbles to stretches and pushes. The fetus curls into a position that will eventually align for birth, head downward, limbs tucked. Even then, kicks continue, though now they feel like stretching hands and feet pressing against the edges of confinement. The fluid gym becomes crowded, but training does not stop until the final moment. Science has revealed just how active this hidden workout can be. Fetuses can move as many as 30 times an hour, adding up to hundreds of movements per day. Many occur during periods of REM-like sleep, suggesting that motor activity is integrated with brain development. The fetus rehearses not only muscles but also neural circuits, building the connections that will allow coordinated motion after birth. It is a relentless practice schedule, an endurance program unlike any other, carried out in silence and darkness but essential to life. These months of weightless kicks also prepare the parent in ways beyond biology. Each push and flutter is a reminder of the presence inside, a physical tether that shapes emotional connection. For many, these movements make pregnancy feel real, transforming abstract knowledge into lived experience. They create anticipation, wonder, sometimes even frustration, but always a dialogue. It is not only the fetus that is training, it is the parent as well, learning patience, resilience, and intimacy with the being they have not yet met. When birth finally comes, the importance of these movements becomes clear. Muscles are strong enough to sustain breathing, sucking, and grasping. Reflexes are sharp enough to respond to touch, sound, and light. The circulatory system, strengthened by constant movement, can handle the sudden shift to independent oxygen supply. Even sleep cycles, shaped by months of activity, help regulate the newborn's rhythms. The months of kicking were not wasted motion. They were the essential foundation for survival. To imagine your own beginning is to realize that you, too, once floated in darkness, limbs moving in a liquid world, muscles strengthening against invisible resistance. Every kick you made was a rehearsal for the moment you would meet gravity, every roll a step toward standing, every hiccup a lesson in breathing. You trained without knowing it, exercised without effort, prepared yourself for life in a way no gym or coach could replicate. The womb was your first playground, your first gymnasium, your first rehearsal stage. Pregnancy is insane because it does not simply build a body in stillness, it builds a body in motion. It creates a passenger who is not passive but active, sculpting muscles and reflexes through constant practice. It turns a uterus into a weightless arena where movement is both survival and play. The months of kicks are more than milestones for parents. They are the secret workouts that make life possible. They are proof that even before birth, we are already moving, already rehearsing, already becoming ourselves. Of all the mysteries in pregnancy, none is more haunting than the question of timing. The body can grow bones, sculpt a brain, circulate two separate bloodstreams, and expand a rib cage. But the moment labor begins remains elusive. No one can say with absolute certainty what flips the switch, what signal tells the uterus to contract, what messenger whispers that the waiting is over. It is a clock with no hands, ticking invisibly, counting down to an hour no one can predict. Even with modern science, this question lingers unanswered. What, at the cellular level, starts birth? For generations, people thought labor must be controlled by the mother's body. After all, it is the uterus that begins to contract, the cervix that dilates, the pelvis that opens. Surely the body carrying the pregnancy calls the shots, and yet evidence suggests the trigger may come from the fetus itself. As the lungs approach maturity in the final weeks, they begin producing surfactant, a substance that keeps tiny air sacs from collapsing after the first breath. Along with surfactant, fetal lungs release proteins into the amniotic fluid, signaling the placenta and maternal tissues. These proteins may act like an announcement. The lungs are ready, the outside world can be survived. From there, a cascade of signals could begin, priming the uterus for contractions. In this view, it is the child who decides when birth begins, declaring readiness with a chemical cry. Hormones are central to the mystery. Throughout pregnancy, progesterone keeps the uterus calm, preventing premature contractions. At some point, this balance shifts. Levels of estrogen rise, tipping the scale. Estrogen increases the number of receptors for oxytocin in uterine muscle, making it more sensitive to contraction signals. Prostaglandins soften the cervix, preparing it to open. Oxytocin itself surges, triggering rhythmic tightening of the uterus. This hormone, known for bonding and affection, becomes the force that drives labor forward. But what causes these changes to align at a specific moment remains unclear. It is not a single switch but a symphony, dozens of hormones adjusting, rising, falling and harmonizing in ways too complex to fully map. Evolutionary timing complicates the picture. Humans face unique challenges compared to other mammals. Our brains are large. Our pelvis is relatively narrow due to bipedalism. If birth happened earlier, the baby might be too underdeveloped to survive. If later, the head might be too large to pass through the birth canal. Some researchers describe human birth as a compromise between two impossible demands: give the baby enough time to develop, but not so much that delivery becomes impossible. This compromise means human infants are born more helpless than many other species, unable to walk or feed themselves. But it also means they are born at the one moment when survival inside is becoming less efficient and survival outside becomes barely possible. The placenta may also play a role in this timing. As it ages in late pregnancy, its efficiency declines. Nutrient transfer slows, hormone production changes, and signals of stress begin to rise. The body may interpret these changes as a deadline, initiating labor to protect the fetus before the placenta fails. In this view, the placenta itself is a kind of timer, a biological hourglass that runs out of sand. Once enough grains have fallen, contractions begin. But why this happens at 40 weeks for some, 37 for others, and 42 for others remains an open question. The clock keeps time differently for every pregnancy, its hands invisible, its rhythm mysterious. Some evidence points to genetics. Certain families tend to have earlier or later deliveries, suggesting inherited patterns in hormonal regulation or uterine sensitivity. Other factors complicate the schedule: nutrition, stress, infection, even environmental cues. Some studies suggest seasonal variations, with more births clustering at particular times of year. Others show that stress hormones can influence timing, potentially triggering earlier labor in times of danger. Evolution may have favored this flexibility. In times of plenty, pregnancy may last longer. In times of threat, it may end sooner, delivering a smaller but viable baby into the world. If true, then the clock is not fixed but responsive, a biological algorithm balancing readiness against risk. The role of the fetus cannot be overstated. Beyond the lungs, the adrenal glands of the fetus begin producing cortisol in the final weeks, a hormone that signals maturity and readiness. Cortisol influences the placenta, increasing estrogen production, which in turn primes the uterus. This cascade suggests a dialogue. The fetus announces readiness through hormones, and the maternal body responds by initiating labor. Labor, then, is not imposed, but negotiated, a compromise between two organisms sharing one body. Each must agree, chemically if not consciously, that the time has come. What makes this mystery more fascinating is how easily it can go wrong. Preterm labor remains one of the great challenges of medicine, occurring when contractions begin before the fetus is fully developed. Sometimes infection, inflammation, or stress can tip the balance early, tricking the body into believing readiness has been reached. On the other end, post-term pregnancies stretch beyond 42 weeks, raising risks as the placenta grows old and efficiency wanes. In both cases, the invisible clock is disrupted, starting too soon or refusing to start at all. Medicine can intervene with drugs to induce labor or halt contractions, but these interventions highlight how much remains unknown. We can push the clock forward or hold it back, but we cannot yet read its face with certainty. The great irony is that, despite our ignorance, the system usually works. Billions of people are born without complication, the clock striking at the right moment again and again. Hormones align, lungs signal, placentas tire, cortisol rises, oxytocin surges, and contractions begin. It is a miracle of precision hidden inside chaos, a process too complex to predict yet too reliable to fail most of the time. The clock with no hands is somehow more dependable than any watch we could build. When you reflect on your own beginning, you must remember that you, too, were once part of this mystery. At some unknown hour, your lungs whispered readiness, your adrenal glands pushed cortisol into your blood, your parents' hormones shifted, and the uterus responded. You triggered your own birth, or perhaps your parents' body did, or perhaps both in concert. The moment cannot be recreated or fully explained, only remembered in the form of your existence. You are here because a clock you cannot see struck the right moment. Pregnancy is insane because it does not only build life, but also decides when life must emerge, without a clock, without conscious control, without predictable schedule. It is a leap of faith written into biology, a countdown that ticks unseen, ending in contractions, sweat, and the first cry of a newborn. Science may map hormones, chart genetic influences, and propose evolutionary compromises. But the truth remains elusive. The clock with no hands continues to keep time in the hidden theatre of the womb, counting down in silence, striking its chime at the moment when one life must divide into two. Pregnancy is full of certainties. Bones will harden, blood will double, organs will shift, senses will awaken. Yet when it comes to the single most important transition, the beginning of labor, certainty vanishes. We can count weeks, measure hormones, track growth, but no scientist, no doctor, no parent can ever look at a pregnant body and say with precision, "This hour, this minute, it will begin." Instead, labor arrives like a storm without a weather forecast. A uterus that has been quiet for months suddenly begins to tighten with purpose. The cervix, which has stayed closed like a locked door, starts to soften and open. Hormones surge, pain builds, and the long stillness of pregnancy transforms into the chaos of birth. And yet, beneath all this drama, we are left with the great unsolved riddle. What sets it off? The human body carries a clock for almost everything: sleep cycles, hunger rhythms, seasonal changes. But for labor, the clock has no visible hands. There is no single signal, no master switch. Instead, there are theories, fragments of truth woven together into a mystery. One theory places the fetus at the center. As the lungs mature in the final weeks, they begin secreting surfactant, a substance that coats the air sacs and keeps them from collapsing after birth. Surfactant is essential for breathing outside the womb, but it may also serve another purpose. As levels rise, proteins from the lungs drift into the amniotic fluid, signaling to the placenta and uterine lining that the fetus is ready. These molecules could act like a biological announcement. The child has finished rehearsing in fluid and is ready to meet the air. If true, this means labor is not imposed by the mother's body, but triggered by the child, a chemical whisper from lungs that have never breathed. Another theory focuses on hormones, those invisible messengers that orchestrate nearly every step of pregnancy. Throughout gestation, progesterone dominates, keeping the uterus relaxed, preventing contractions from becoming coordinated. Without this calm, pregnancies would end too soon. But toward the end, estrogen rises, tilting the balance. Estrogen increases the number of receptors for oxytocin, the hormone of contraction and bonding, making the uterus newly sensitive to its signals. Prostaglandins begin to soften the cervix, transforming it from a rigid gate into a pliable opening. When oxytocin surges, it no longer falls on deaf muscle. It finds a uterus primed to respond. Contractions build, regular and powerful, each one stronger than the last. Yet what orchestrates the timing of these hormonal changes remains mysterious. Why one night and not the next? Why 38 weeks for some and 42 for others? The pieces of the puzzle are visible, but the exact moment of assembly is hidden. The placenta itself may serve as the clock, an organ both temporary and essential. Early in pregnancy, it produces hormones that maintain stability, but as it ages, its efficiency declines. Nutrient transfer slows, oxygen diffusion becomes less robust, and stress signals begin to rise. This slow decline may act like an hourglass, grains of sand falling until the placenta signals that it can no longer sustain the pregnancy much longer. In this theory, labor begins not at a moment of perfection, but at a moment of compromise, the body deciding that survival outside is safer than survival inside. Yet again, the exact tipping point remains unclear. One placenta seems to last 37 weeks, another 41, and no test can predict exactly when the grains of sand will run out. Some researchers turn to evolutionary history for answers. Humans face a unique dilemma. Our brains are enormous compared to body size, but our pelvises are narrow, constrained by the demands of walking upright. If gestation were longer, the head might grow too large to pass through the birth canal. If it were shorter, the newborn might be too immature to survive. The timing of human birth may be an evolutionary compromise, striking a balance between these competing demands. Anthropologists call this the obstetrical dilemma. We are born earlier, more helpless, more dependent than many other mammals, because that is the only way birth can happen at all. But even if this explains the broad outline of timing, it does not explain why one baby is born at dawn on one day and another a week later. Evolution may have shaped the window, but the minute hand of the clock still eludes us. The fetus's adrenal glands provide another clue. In late pregnancy, they begin producing cortisol, a hormone that influences the placenta to increase estrogen production. Cortisol, rising from within the fetus, may push the maternal body toward labor readiness. This adds to the view that birth is a negotiation, a dialogue between two bodies. The fetus signals maturity with cortisol and lung proteins, while the maternal body responds with estrogen, prostaglandins, and oxytocin. Labor, in this sense, is not imposed, but agreed upon, a compromise that balances readiness inside with readiness outside. It is as if mother and child, without words, strike a chemical bargain. The time has come. But clocks sometimes misfire. Preterm labor reveals the fragility of this balance. Infection, inflammation, or stress can trigger contractions too early, before the fetus is ready. The lungs may be immature, the brain not yet fully developed, but the clock has been tricked into ringing its alarm. On the other end, post-term pregnancies stretch past 42 weeks, with the placenta growing old and risks increasing. Here the clock seems stalled, refusing to signal. Medicine steps in with induction, using prostaglandins or synthetic oxytocin to start the cascade. These interventions highlight the truth. We can force the hands of the clock, but we still cannot see its face. The moment of birth is full of sounds and movements, but the most important one is nearly invisible. A cry, a gasp, the expansion of tiny lungs, that single act marks the most dramatic physiological change in a human life. Until that instant, a newborn has never breathed air. Oxygen has arrived only by way of the placenta, passed across membranes from another bloodstream. The lungs have been filled with fluid, folded and collapsed, silent sacs waiting for their role. Then, in a span of seconds, everything changes. Air rushes in, alveoli expand, circulation reroutes, and two bodies that were joined become separate. It is the transformation from aquatic existence to terrestrial survival, the moment a fetus becomes a newborn. For months, the lungs rehearsed quietly in the womb. The fetus practiced breathing by drawing amniotic fluid in and out, flexing the diaphragm, preparing muscles for the future. These motions served no immediate purpose. Oxygen came from the placenta, but they were essential training. They strengthened the chest wall, tested neural circuits, and kept the lungs developing. Yet the alveoli, the tiny sacs where oxygen exchange would occur, remained closed. They were lined with a slick substance called surfactant, secreted in the final weeks of pregnancy, waiting for the day it would reduce surface tension and allow the alveoli to spring open. Without surfactant, those sacs would stick shut like damp balloons. With it, they are ready for the moment of truth. That moment comes with the first breath. As the newborn's chest rises, air pushes into passages that have never felt it before. Fluid is squeezed out or absorbed, replaced by oxygen-rich air. The alveoli inflate, surfactant coats them, and gas exchange begins. Oxygen diffuses across thin membranes into blood, carbon dioxide diffuses out to be exhaled. What has been a quiet system suddenly becomes the central life support mechanism. The lungs, silent for 9 months, are now the loudest players in the body's orchestra. The cry that follows is not just sound, but proof of success, evidence that air has entered, oxygen has been claimed, and life outside the womb is underway. At the same instant, circulation undergoes a revolution. In the womb, blood bypassed the lungs almost entirely. Special shunts, like shortcuts in a map, directed flow away from the unused pulmonary system. The foramen ovale, a hole between the right and left atria of the heart, allowed blood to skip the lungs and move directly to systemic circulation. The ductus arteriosus, a vessel linking the pulmonary artery to the aorta, shunted blood around the lungs as well. All of this made sense when the placenta provided oxygen. But once the first breath is taken, these shortcuts must close. The closure happens in seconds to minutes. As oxygen levels rise, pressure in the lungs falls, drawing blood into pulmonary circulation. The foramen ovale snaps shut as pressure in the left atrium exceeds the right. The ductus arteriosus constricts under the influence of oxygen and changing hormones, diverting blood toward the newly working lungs. In a heartbeat, circulation is rerouted. The entire cardiovascular system reconfigures itself, switching from placental to pulmonary oxygenation. This transition is so fast and so critical that it is often described as the single most dramatic physiological change in human life. No other moment involves such a complete reorganization of vital systems in so little time. The cord connecting parent and child becomes obsolete in an instant. Once the lungs are open, oxygen no longer needs to cross the placenta. Clamping or cutting the cord separates the circulations permanently. Some advocate for delayed clamping, allowing a few extra minutes for placental blood to flow into the newborn, enriching iron stores and boosting volume. But regardless of timing, the meaning is the same: independence. A baby that once depended on another body for every molecule of oxygen now breathes alone, sustained by its own lungs, its own heart, its own blood. This transition is not always smooth. Premature infants born before surfactant levels are sufficient may struggle to inflate alveoli. Their first breaths can be labored, their lungs stiff, their oxygen exchange limited. Medicine now steps in with surfactant therapy, delivering the missing ingredient to coat their alveoli and allow breathing to begin. Other infants may struggle if fluid lingers in the lungs or if shunts fail to close. In these moments, the fragility of the first breath is revealed. Success is not guaranteed, and yet, more often than not, it happens with breathtaking reliability. Billions of humans have gasped into the air, cried out, and proven that the system works. The first breath is not only biological, but symbolic. It is the first act of individuality, the moment a baby takes in the same air as the rest of us. Until then, existence was hidden, aquatic, tethered. Now, lungs expand against ribs, chest rises and falls, breath becomes rhythm. It is the same rhythm that will continue for decades, repeated millions of times, sustaining thought, growth, love, and memory. The first cry echoes as a signal to the world. This body is alive. This body is separate. This body has begun. From the parent's perspective, that cry is relief. Hours of labor, contractions, sweat, fear, all culminate in a sound that proves the impossible has happened. The baby has crossed from one world to another, from water to air, from dependence to independence. The science of it is astonishing, but the emotion of it is overwhelming. It is why even the most experienced doctors and midwives pause when the cry comes, listening for that proof of life. It is not just routine, it is a miracle repeated every day. What makes this moment even stranger is how it mirrors the beginning of life on Earth. Billions of years ago, organisms emerged from the sea and adapted to breathe air. Every newborn repeats that evolutionary leap in a matter of seconds. They go from gill-like circulation to lung-based respiration, from water-filled passages to air-filled alveoli. Each baby is an echo of that ancient transition, replaying history in miniature. The drama of life leaving the ocean is folded into every delivery room, every nursery, every first breath. The metabolic demands shift instantly as well. In the womb, glucose and oxygen arrived pre-processed through the placenta. After birth, the newborn must regulate its own blood sugar, keep itself warm, and balance its own oxygen intake. The liver begins mobilizing glycogen, the thyroid ramps up, and the brain, which consumes more energy than any other organ, relies on oxygen streaming in from those first breaths. Every organ is jolted into independence, but none more so than the lungs and heart. They carry the burden of transition, proving within minutes whether the new life will thrive. To think about your own first moment is humbling. You too once had lungs filled with fluid, alveoli sealed shut, a heart pumping blood through shortcuts that made sense only in the womb. Then came a gasp, a cry, a rush of air that had never entered you before. Your circulation rerouted, your heart flipped its flows, your lungs expanded, and you were alive in a new way. The memory is gone, but the proof is in your breath, repeated countless times since. Every inhale you take is a descendant of that first impossible act. Pregnancy is insane, not just because it builds a brain or grows a skeleton, but because it culminates in this transition. The moment when a body that never breathed suddenly must, without rehearsal, without pause, without failure. The stakes could not be higher, and yet the system works almost every time. The first breath is both science and poetry, a physiological revolution and a symbolic beginning. It is the sound of life declaring itself, the instant when biology completes its gamble and a fetus becomes a child. For all our ignorance, the system works astonishingly well. Billions of humans have been born through this mystery, most at the right time, most without intervention. The body may not reveal its clock to us, but it keeps time reliably. Hormones shift, lungs signal, placentas falter, cortisol rises, oxytocin surges, and labor begins. It is a symphony too complex to predict, yet too precise to fail most of the time. The clock with no hands strikes when it must, again and again, generation after generation. To imagine your own beginning is to remember that you too were once caught in this riddle. One night, one day, without your awareness, your body and your parent's body exchanged signals. Your lungs whispered readiness, your adrenal glands pushed cortisol, your parent's uterus grew sensitive, and the first contractions began. The moment cannot be reconstructed. It is lost to history, hidden in chemistry, remembered only in the fact that you exist. You are here because the invisible clock struck its hour. Pregnancy is insane because it not only builds life, but also decides when that life must emerge, without visible mechanism, without conscious control, without predictable schedule. It is a mystery written in hormones, in placental aging, in evolutionary compromise. It is a countdown that ticks silently, striking an alarm that only the body can hear. Labor begins when the clock with no hands declares the time is right. And though science will continue to search for the exact mechanism, perhaps part of the wonder lies in the uncertainty. Birth arrives not by appointment, but by mystery, a reminder that life's most profound transitions are not always meant to be timed.